Hello, friends. Did you know that nearly 80% of those who watch my videos aren't subscribed? If you enjoy the content, I'd truly appreciate it if you hit that subscribe button. It helps a lot. Also, don't forget to leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments. By the way, where are you watching from? Let me know in the comments. Have you ever been in the desert at night? Not where darkness surrounds you, but where it becomes a part of you. Where every sound carries for miles and silence has its own weight. This is where it happened. Black Rock Desert, Nevada, March 2019. Before you start thinking I'm some conspiracy theorist living in a camper van with aluminum foil-covered windows, let me explain. I was working as a field security guard for a private geology research company. It wasn't a glamorous job. We monitored drilling operations, checked perimeter fences, and made sure no one entered restricted areas. It was a standard corporate security job with better pay than security guards at shopping malls. Kara Dunn was my partner that rotation. She'd been doing this for 3 years longer than me. Ex-military police. The kind of a person who could spot a coyote at 200 yards and tell you if it had eaten recently just by watching how it moved. We weren't friends exactly. More like people who trusted each other to stay awake during long shifts and not ask stupid questions. The company we worked for, I can't name them, they had mineral rights on a stretch of land about 40 miles northeast of Gerlach. Empty country. The kind of place where you drive for an hour and see maybe 2 other vehicles. Our site was a temporary operation, just core sampling and ground-penetrating radar surveys. Nothing that would make headlines. That night started normal. March nights in the desert get cold, the kind of cold that seeps through your jacket and settles in your bones. We were doing our usual patrol circuit, a 23-mile loop that took us around the perimeter of the survey zone. Our vehicle was a white Ford F-250, modified with extra fuel tanks and a light bar that could turn night into day if we needed it. Kara was driving. I was in the passenger seat with the tablet that showed our GPS route and the location of every sensor array we'd installed. The road wasn't really a road, more like tire tracks across hardpan and alkali flats. We'd been out for about 90 minutes, making our second circuit of the night. "You see that?" Kara said. I looked up from the tablet. "See what?" "Straight ahead, 11 o'clock position." I leaned forward, squinting through the windshield. At first, I didn't see anything. Then I did. A light, not moving, just hanging there above the horizon. Bright, but not like a star. More focused, like someone pointing a powerful flashlight at us from several miles away. "Aircraft?" I said. "No nav lights, no sound, and it's not moving." She was right. We'd seen plenty of planes out here, military jets from the ranges to the south, private aircraft heading to Burning Man during the season. They all moved. They all made noise eventually. This did neither. Kara slowed the truck to about 15 miles per hour. We both watched the light. It stayed fixed in position, maybe 30 degrees above the horizon. If I had to guess the distance, I'd say 5 or 6 miles out, but distance is deceptive in the desert at night. Could have been 2 miles, could have been 20. "Stop the truck," I said. Kara brought us to a full stop and killed the engine. The sudden silence was absolute. No wind, no insects, nothing. In the desert, you usually hear something. A distant rumble of a truck on Highway 47, the whisper of wind across the sand, the ticking of cooling metal. This was different. This was the kind of quiet that makes you aware of your own heartbeat. We got out. The air was crisp, maybe 35 degrees. I could see my breath. Above us, the Milky Way spread across the sky like spilled paint. more stars than you could count in a lifetime. And there, among all those stars, was that light, still motionless, still watching. "You getting anything on your phone?" Kara asked. I pulled out my phone. No signal. That wasn't unusual out here. We were in a dead zone most of the time, but I always had at least one bar at this location. Hello, friends. Welcome to the Sleep Aliens. Did you know that nearly 80% of those who watch my videos aren't subscribed? If you enjoy the content, I'd truly appreciate it if you hit that subscribe button. It helps a lot. Also, don't forget to leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments. By the way, where are you watching from? Let me know in the comments. Have you ever been in the desert at night? Not where darkness surrounds you, but where it becomes a part of you. Where every sound carries for miles and silence has its own weight. This is where it happened. Black Rock Desert, Nevada, March 2019. Before you start thinking I'm some conspiracy theorist living in a camper van with aluminum foil-covered windows, let me explain. I was working as a field security guard for a private geology research company. It wasn't a glamorous job. We monitored drilling operations, checked perimeter fences, and made sure no one entered restricted areas. It was a standard corporate security job with better pay than security guards at shopping malls. Kara Dunn was my partner that rotation. She'd been doing this for 3 years longer than me. Ex-military police. The kind of a person who could spot a coyote at 200 yards and tell you if it had eaten recently just by watching how it moved. We weren't friends exactly. More like people who trusted each other to stay awake during long shifts and not ask stupid questions. The company we worked for, I can't name them, they had mineral rights on a stretch of land about 40 miles northeast of Gerlach. Empty country. The kind of place where you drive for an hour and see maybe 2 other vehicles. Our site was a temporary operation, just core sampling and ground-penetrating radar surveys. Nothing that would make headlines. That night started normal. March nights in the desert get cold. The kind of cold that seeps through your jacket and settles in your bones. We were doing our usual patrol circuit, a 23-mile loop that took us around the perimeter of the survey zone. Our vehicle was a white Ford F-250, modified with extra fuel tanks and a light bar that could turn night into day if we needed it. Kara was driving. I was in the passenger seat with the tablet that showed our GPS route and the location of every sensor array we'd installed. The road wasn't really a road, more like tire tracks across hardpan and alkali flats. We'd been out for about 90 minutes, making our second circuit of the night. "You see that?" Kara said. I looked up from the tablet. "See what?" "Straight ahead. 11 o'clock position." I leaned forward, squinting through the windshield. At first, I didn't see anything. Then I did. A light. Not moving, just hanging there above the horizon. Bright, but not like a star. More focused. Like someone pointing a powerful flashlight at us from several miles away. "Aircraft?" I said. "No nav lights, no sound. And it's not moving." She was right. We'd seen plenty of planes out here. Military jets from the ranges to the south. Private aircraft heading to Burning Man during the season. They all moved. They all made noise eventually. This did neither. Kara slowed the truck to about 15 miles per hour. We both watched the light. It stayed fixed in position, maybe 30 degrees above the horizon. If I had to guess the distance, I'd say 5 or 6 miles out, but distance is deceptive in the desert at night. Could have been 2 miles, could have been 20. "Stop the truck," I said. Kara brought us to a full stop and killed the engine. The sudden silence was absolute. No wind, no insects, nothing. In the desert, you usually hear something. A distant rumble of a truck on Highway 47, the whisper of wind across the sand, the ticking of cooling metal. This was different. This was the kind of quiet that makes you aware of your own heartbeat. We got out. The air was crisp, maybe 35 degrees. I could see my breath. Above us, the Milky Way spread across the sky like spilled paint. More stars than you could count in a lifetime. And there, among all those stars, was that light. Still motionless, still watching. "You getting anything on your phone?" Kara asked. I pulled out my phone. No signal. That wasn't unusual out here. We were in a dead zone most of the time, but I always had at least one bar at this location. Now? Nothing. Not even a searching indicator, just blank. "Dead," I said. Kara checked hers. Same thing. We stood there for maybe 3 minutes just watching that light. Then Kara said something I'll never forget. "There's 2 more." I looked where she was pointing. She was right. 2 additional lights had appeared, one to the left of the original, one to the right. Same brightness, same quality of light. They formed a perfect triangle in the sky. "Okay," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "That's weird." "That's not the word I'd use," Kara said. Her hand was resting on her hip, near where she kept her sidearm. Not drawing it, just aware of it. The 3 lights hung there in formation, perfectly still, perfectly silent. Then, without warning, they moved. Not fast, not slow. They simply shifted position like someone had nudged them on a screen. The triangle became a straight line, horizontal across the horizon. 3 lights in a row, evenly spaced. "Are you seeing this?" My voice sounded strange to me, too high, too tight. "Yeah." The lights held that position for about 15 seconds. Then they moved again. This time, 2 of them stayed in place, while the third, the center one, moved upward. The formation now looked like an upside-down Y. "This is military," I said, needing it to be true. "Some kind of drone exercise, has to be." "Show me a drone that hovers like that without any sound," Kara said. "Show me a drone that stays that stable in formation." She had a point. Even the most advanced drones made some noise. Rotors, engines, something. We were in the middle of nowhere with 0 ambient sound. If these were drones, we'd hear them. The lights rearranged again. Back to a triangle, but this time inverted. Point down. Then, just as suddenly as they'd appeared, they went out. Not gradually, not fading. Just off. Like someone flipped a switch. The darkness that followed felt oppressive. Heavy. I realized I'd been holding my breath. "Get in the truck," Kara said. We climbed back in. Kara turned the key. Nothing happened. She tried again. The engine didn't even turn over. No click, no grind, nothing. "What the hell?" she muttered. I checked the dashboard. All the lights were dead. The tablet had gone black. My watch, a digital Casio I'd had for 6 years, showed a blinking 00 sur soir. "Check your watch," I said. Kara looked at her wrist. She wore an automatic, didn't need batteries. "Still running, why? Mine's reset. What time do you have?" 10:47. I pulled out my phone, even though it was dead. When the screen finally flickered to life, it showed 10:24 p.m. "That's wrong," I said. "We left base at 9:30. We've been out for more than 24 minutes. Kara checked her watch again, tapped the face. "Mine says 10:47. We sat there in the dark truck, trying to understand what that meant. 23 minutes, gone. Not fast, not slow, just gone. "Try the engine again," I said. This time it caught. All the dashboard lights came on at once. The radio blared to life at full volume. The tablet rebooted with a cheerful startup chime. Everything worked, like nothing had ever been wrong. Kara put the truck in gear without a word and turned us around. She didn't head back to complete the patrol route. She pointed us toward base camp, and she drove faster than I'd ever seen her drive on these roads. I kept watching the sky behind us through the side mirror. Nothing, just stars and darkness. We didn't talk during the drive back. What was there to say? We'd both seen it, whatever it was. Base camp was a cluster of prefab buildings and equipment trailers arranged in a rough square around a gravel lot. Security lights on poles cast everything in harsh white illumination. There were 3 other vehicles parked there, belonging to the overnight survey crew working in one of the drilling sheds. Kara parked our truck in its usual spot, but didn't get out right away. She sat there with her hands on the wheel, staring straight ahead. "We need to report this," I said. "Report what exactly?" Her voice was flat. "That we saw lights? That our electronics glitched? That we lost 23 minutes and neither of us can account for it?" "Something happened out there." "Yeah, but what?" She finally looked at me. In the harsh light from the security poles, her face looked older than it had an hour ago. "You know what happens if we report this. They'll pull us off the site, send us for drug tests, psych evaluations. We'll be the crazy people who saw UFOs in the desert." She wasn't wrong. I'd worked enough corporate security to know how this played out. Report something weird, something that doesn't fit the normal operations manual, and you become a liability. They'd find a reason to let us go quietly with non-disclosure agreements and maybe a small severance if we kept our mouths shut. "So, what do we do?" I asked. "We finish the shift, we clock out, we think about this." She opened her door. "And we don't tell anyone until we figure out what we actually saw." I wanted to argue, but I couldn't find the words, because she was right. We didn't know what we'd seen. Not really. We went into the main security office, a trailer with cheap wood paneling and fluorescent lights that hummed constantly. The overnight supervisor, a guy named Pete, who mostly sat on his phone and collected a paycheck, barely looked up when we came in. "How's the perimeter?" he asked. "Clear," Kara said. "No issues." Pete made a note in the log and went back to his phone. We spent the rest of the shift in that trailer, drinking bad coffee and not talking about what had happened. Every hour, we were supposed to make another patrol circuit. Kara volunteered for all of them, and I didn't stop her. I couldn't face going back out there. Not yet. At 6 a.m., the day shift arrived. We clocked out, got in our personal vehicles, and drove the long road back to Gerlach. Kara lived in a rented room above a bar. I had a trailer at the edge of town. We didn't make plans to meet up. We just went our separate ways. I didn't sleep that day. I tried. I lay in bed in my dark trailer with the cheap blackout curtains drawn, but every time I closed my eyes, I saw those lights, that perfect triangle, the way they moved without any visible means of propulsion. The weight of that silence. Around 2 in the afternoon, my phone buzzed. A text from Kara. "We need to talk. Diner at 7. The diner was the only real restaurant in Gerlach, a place called Bruno's that served passable breakfast all day and coffee strong enough to strip paint. I got there 15 minutes early and took a booth in the back corner where we could see the door, but nobody could easily overhear us. Kara arrived right at 7, still wearing the same clothes from our shift. She looked like she hadn't slept either. She slid into the booth across from me and didn't waste time with small talk. "I called someone I know," she said. "Former MP buddy of mine who works civil service at Nellis now. Nothing classified, just admin stuff, but he's been there 20 years, sees things, hears things. And?" I asked him, hypothetically, if there was any military drone operation in our area last night. Any exercises, any tests, anything that might explain coordinated lights in the sky. What did he say? He said no, nothing scheduled, nothing active. He checked the logs. She paused. Then he asked me why I wanted to know, so I told him, kept it vague, said we saw something weird on patrol. And he got quiet. Then he told me I should drop it, said that area has a history. Things happen out there that don't get explained. People who push for explanations don't like the answers they find. I felt something cold settle in my stomach. What kind of history? He wouldn't say, but he mentioned Echo Basin. Where's that? About 15 miles from where we were last night. Kara pulled out her phone and showed me a map. She'd marked our patrol route and a location to the northeast, a depression in the terrain that formed a natural basin. There's nothing there now, but back in the 50s and 60s it was part of the old nuclear test support infrastructure. Observation posts, tracking stations, that kind of thing, all supposedly decommissioned in the 70s. Supposedly? That's the word he used, supposedly. She put her phone away. Riley, I've been going over last night in my head, every detail, and I keep coming back to those 23 minutes. Your watch didn't stop? No, it didn't, which means those 23 minutes happened. We just don't remember them. She leaned forward. I want to know what happened in those minutes, don't you? I did. Of course I did. But I also knew that some questions are better left unasked. Some doors, once opened, don't close again. What are you suggesting? I asked. I'm suggesting we go back. During our next shift. We go back to that exact spot and we see if it happens again. That's insane. Maybe. But I need to know. Her eyes were hard, determined. I've spent my whole life dealing with things I can understand. Rules, procedures, chains of command. This doesn't fit, it doesn't make sense, and that bothers me more than I can explain. I understood, I felt the same thing, an itch in my brain that wouldn't go away. The need to know, to understand, even if the understanding came with a price. When's our next shift? I asked. Tomorrow night, same route, same time. I should have said no. Should have told her this was a bad idea. Should have walked away and found a different job in a different town where the sky didn't play tricks and time moved in predictable ways. Instead, I said, okay, tomorrow night, we go back. Kara nodded, satisfied. We ordered food, neither of us ate, and coffee we didn't drink, and then we went our separate ways again, each of us alone with our thoughts and the weight of what we'd agreed to do. That night, I did sleep, but my dreams were strange. I was standing in the desert under a sky full of lights, and somewhere in the distance something was watching me. Something vast and patient and utterly indifferent to whether I lived or died. I woke up at dawn with the certainty that tomorrow night, when we went back out to that spot in the desert, we were going to find answers. I just wasn't sure we'd like them. The day dragged. I tried to fill it with normal things, laundry at the coin-op in town, groceries at the general store, an oil change for my truck that I'd been putting off. But nothing felt real. Everything felt like I was moving through a dream, or maybe preparing for something I couldn't name. Around 4 in the afternoon, my phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer. Then something made me pick up. Riley Monroe? The voice was male, older, with a slight rasp, like he'd been a smoker once. Who is this? My name doesn't matter. What matters is that you need to stop asking questions about Echo Basin. My blood went cold. I don't know what you're talking about. Yes, you do. You and your partner saw something 2 nights ago. You've been looking into it. You need to stop. How do you... I know because we monitor communications in that area. We have for a long time. That phone call your partner made to Nellis, we heard it. We hear everything. I stood up from where I'd been sitting on my trailer's steps. Who the hell are you? Someone trying to help you. What you saw, it's not the first time. It won't be the last. But the people who investigate these things, who try to understand them, they rarely benefit from the knowledge. That sounds like a threat. It's a warning. There are things in the desert that predate our understanding. Things we've learned not to disturb. You go back out there tomorrow night, you're disturbing something that should be left alone. And if I ignore this warning? There was a long pause. Then you'll learn the same lesson others have learned. The hard way. The line went dead. I stood there holding my phone, my hand shaking slightly. Part of me wanted to call Kara immediately, to tell her about this, to maybe convince her we should back out. But another part of me, the stubborn part that had gotten me into trouble more than once in my life, was angry. Someone thought they could scare me away from the truth. Someone was watching us, listening to us. That made me want to go back even more. I texted Kara instead of calling. Got a weird phone call. Need to talk before shift. She replied immediately. Me too. Bruno's at 8. Come armed. That last part made my pulse quicken. Kara wasn't dramatic. If she said come armed, she meant it. I checked my gear, sidearm, a Glock 19 I'd carried for years. Flashlight, knife. I added a few things that weren't standard security equipment. A digital recorder, a backup camera, extra batteries. If something was going to happen tonight, I wanted evidence. Bruno's diner was busier at 8 p.m. than it had been the previous evening. A few locals, some truck drivers passing through, a couple that looked like tourists who'd gotten lost on their way to Reno. Kara was already there, same back booth, same untouched coffee. I slid in across from her. She looked wired, alert in a way that reminded me she'd spent years in situations where alertness kept you alive. Tell me about your call, she said. I recounted the conversation word for word. When I finished, Kara's jaw was tight. Mine was different, she said. Woman's voice. Said her name was Dr. Sarah Vickers. Said she was a researcher who'd been studying anomalous events in the Black Rock region for 15 years. She wanted to meet with us, tonight, before our shift. Did you agree? Yes. She's waiting at the old gas station on the north end of town. Closed now, but she said she'd be in a gray sedan. Could be a trap, I said. Could be, or it could be someone with actual answers. Kara checked her watch. She said 9 o'clock. That's in 40 minutes. What do you think? I thought about the voice on the phone, the warning, the implication that we were being watched. Then I thought about those 23 missing minutes and the lights in the sky. I think we go find out what she wants, I said. We left Bruno's separately and met at my truck. I drove north through Gerlach, past the handful of businesses that kept the town alive, past the houses that looked like they'd been there since the 50s. The old gas station was exactly where Kara said it would be, a relic from when this highway was busier, before the interstate pulled traffic away. A gray Honda Accord sat in the empty lot, engine running. As we pulled up, a woman got out. She was maybe 60, white hair pulled back in a practical ponytail, wearing jeans and a down jacket. She looked like a college professor, which, I'd learn, wasn't far from the truth. Kara and I got out but kept our distance. The woman raised her hands, showing they were empty. Riley Monroe and Kara Dunn, she said. Thank you for coming. I'm Sarah Vickers. I teach, taught, astrophysics at UC Davis. I'm retired now. Sort of. Sort of? Kara said. Retirement didn't take, not when there's still work to do. She lowered her hands. I know what you saw 2 nights ago. And I know you're planning to go back tonight. How? I asked. Because that's what everyone does. They see it, they can't explain it. They have to go back. She walked closer, slow and careful. I've been documenting events in this area since 2004. Lights in the sky, lost time, equipment failures. There's a pattern. It centers on Echo Basin and the land around it. What's causing it? Kara asked. I don't know. Not exactly. But I have theories. Vickers pulled a tablet from her jacket pocket and showed us a map covered in colored dots. Each dot represents a reported anomaly. Sightings, time distortions, electromagnetic disturbances. See the concentration? The dots clustered around a specific area, about 15 miles from where we'd been 2 nights ago. Echo Basin. There's something there, Dr. Vickers said. Something underground. I've used ground-penetrating radar, gravimetric sensors, every tool I can get my hands on. There's a structure, buried deep, and it's not natural. A structure? I said. Like what, a building? Like a facility. Military, I assumed at first. But the readings don't match anything I know. The geometry is wrong. The materials are wrong. And there's energy down there, a lot of it. Kara crossed her arms. Why are you telling us this? Because you're going to go back anyway. And if you do, I want you to take this. She reached into her car and pulled out a black metal case about the size of a shoebox. This is a multi-spectrum recorder. It captures electromagnetic frequencies across a range much wider than normal equipment. It also has a gravimetric sensor and a precision clock synced to atomic time. She opened the case. Inside was a device that looked like someone had combined a high-end camera with a scientific instrument. Lights blinked along one side. If you encounter another event, Dr. Vickers continued, this will record it. All of it. Things the human eye can't see. Things normal cameras miss. It might give us the evidence we need to understand what's happening. Why don't you go yourself? I asked. Her expression darkened. I did, 3 years ago. I went to Echo Basin with 2 research assistants. We set up equipment, waited. Something happened. I lost 4 hours. When I came to, one of my assistants was gone. We found him 2 days later, wandering Highway 47. He couldn't speak. Still can't. Whatever happened to him, it broke something in his mind. The silence that followed was heavy. I won't go back there, Dr. Vickers said quietly. But I need to know. I need data. If you're willing to take this risk, at least let it mean something. Kara reached for the case. How does it work? Dr. Vickers spent the next 10 minutes explaining the device. It was surprisingly simple once you understood the interface. Point it at the anomaly, press record, let it run. The data would be stored on solid-state memory, multiple redundancies to prevent loss. One more thing, Dr. Vickers said as we prepared to leave. If you lose time again, don't panic. The effect seems to be temporary. You'll come back. The question is what happens during those missing minutes. You think we're being abducted? Kara asked, her tone skeptical. I think something is interacting with you. Whether it's physical abduction or something else, something affecting perception or memory, I can't say. But the pattern is consistent. Lights, lost time, and then gaps in memory that can't be explained. Sounds like alien abduction, I said, half joking. Dr. Vickers didn't smile. I'm a scientist. I deal in evidence, not speculation. But I will say this. If there are intelligences behind these phenomena, and I believe there are, they don't think like we do. They don't operate by our rules. And that makes them dangerous in ways we might not understand until it's too late. With that cheerful thought, Kara and I headed back to base camp. We arrived at 9:45, 15 minutes before our shift started. The overnight supervisor barely registered our presence, just waved us toward the truck. Kara drove again. I held the case with Dr. Vickers' recorder on my lap. The weight of it felt like responsibility, like we were carrying something important and fragile. "You scared?" Kara asked as we left the lights of base camp behind. "Terrified," I admitted. "You?" "Yeah. But I'm also curious. Whatever this is, we're part of it now. Might as well see it through." We drove in silence for 20 minutes, following the same route we'd taken 2 nights ago. The desert was just as empty, just as dark. Above us, the stars were brilliant and cold. At 10:32, according to the truck's clock, we reached the spot where we'd stopped before. Kara pulled over and killed the engine. "You want to get out?" she asked. I didn't, but I opened my door anyway. The cold hit me immediately, sharper than 2 nights ago. I could feel it biting at my exposed skin, my ears, my nose. Kara came around the front of the truck, her breath visible in the frigid air. "Nothing yet," she said, scanning the sky. I set up Dr. Vickers' recorder on the hood of the truck, pointing it toward the horizon where we'd first seen the lights. The device hummed softly, its display showing a cascade of numbers and graphs I didn't fully understand. We waited. 10 minutes passed. 15. Nothing. Just the desert and the stars and the cold. Then Kara grabbed my arm. "Look." A light, single this time, but brighter than before. It appeared in the exact same position as 2 nights ago, as if it had been waiting for us. "Recording," I said, though the device was already running. The light hung there, pulsing slowly. Not regularly, like a beacon, but organically, like something breathing. Then 2 more lights appeared, forming the same triangle we'd seen before. "Here we go," Kara whispered. The lights began to move. Not the same pattern as before. This time they spiraled, weaving around each other in a pattern that hurt to watch, like my eyes couldn't quite track the movement properly. "You seeing this?" My voice sounded distant to my own ears. "Yeah." The lights suddenly dropped lower, much lower. They were no longer on the horizon. They were maybe a quarter mile away, hovering over the desert floor. And they were getting closer. "Kara, I see them." The truck's electronics died. All of them, simultaneously. Dashboard lights, radio, everything. The recorder on the hood kept running, its independent power supply unaffected. The temperature dropped. I don't mean it got colder. I mean it plummeted, like someone had opened a door to a freezer. My breath came out in thick clouds. Ice began forming on the truck's windshield. The lights were close now, maybe 100 yards away. I could see they weren't solid. They were spheres of light with something dark inside them, shapes that moved and shifted. "We should get in the truck," I said. "The truck is dead," Kara replied. But she was already moving toward the door. I grabbed the recorder. The display was going crazy, numbers scrolling faster than I could read, graphs spiking into the red. That's when I heard it. A sound like wind, but not wind. Like static, but not static. It was a sound that seemed to come from inside my head and outside simultaneously, a frequency that made my teeth ache and my vision blur. The lights were 50 yards away now. I could feel something from them, a pressure in my chest, a weight behind my eyes. It felt like being underwater, like the air itself had become thick and resistant. Kara had her gun out. I wanted to tell her it was useless, that you can't shoot light, but my mouth wouldn't work properly. The cold was overwhelming now, so intense it burned. 20 yards. The shapes inside the lights were clearer. They moved with purpose, with intelligence. I had the sudden, absolute certainty that they were aware of us, that they were studying us the same way we'd been studying them. 10 yards. Time did something strange. It didn't stop exactly, it just fractured. I was aware of multiple moments happening at once. I was standing by the truck. I was inside the truck. I was somewhere else, somewhere cold and metallic and vast. I was all of these things simultaneously. Kara was saying something, but her voice was stretched out, distorted, like an audio file playing at the wrong speed. The lights were right in front of us now. So bright, I should have been blinded, but instead, I could see everything. I could see the crystalline structure of the light, the way it bent and refracted. I could see through it to something beyond, something that existed in a space my brain wasn't equipped to process. And then I saw them. Figures, tall and thin and impossibly proportioned. They stood inside the light, or maybe they were the light, I couldn't tell. Their faces, if you could call them faces, were wrong. Too many angles. Eyes that saw in dimensions I couldn't comprehend. One of them looked at me. Really looked at me. And I felt it. A presence in my mind, cold and curious and utterly alien. It wasn't hostile, but it wasn't friendly either. It was studying me, cataloging me, like a researcher examining an interesting specimen. I tried to scream. I think I succeeded. But the sound was swallowed by that pressure, that weight, that impossible cold. The last thing I remember clearly was the recorder. It was still running, still capturing everything. The display showed a single word, repeated over and over. Anomaly, anomaly, anomaly. Then everything went white. I woke up on the ground next to the truck. The sun was rising, painting the desert in shades of amber and red. I was freezing, my body curled into a tight ball, every muscle screaming in protest as I tried to move. "Kara?" My voice came out as a croak. She was sitting against the truck's rear tire, her face pale, her eyes wide and unfocused. When I said her name again, she blinked and looked at me. "What time is it?" she asked. I fumbled for my phone. The screen was cracked, but it still worked. 6:47 a.m. "Morning," I said. "Thursday morning." "We started our shift Wednesday night," Kara said slowly, like she was working out a difficult math problem. "Wednesday night at 10. Yeah. Riley, that means we lost 8 hours. We lost 8 hours. We sat there in the growing light trying to process that. 8 hours, not 23 minutes this time. 8 entire hours of our lives just gone. "Do you remember anything?" Kara asked. I tried. It was like trying to remember a dream that slips away the moment you wake up. There were fragments, light, cold, a sense of being moved, of floating, and those faces, those impossible faces. "Some," I said. "Not much. You?" "I remember the lights. I remember them getting close." She touched her forehead, wincing. I remember feeling like my skull was being pried open from the inside. Then nothing until I woke up here. I stood up slowly, every joint protesting. The recorder, where was the recorder? I found it 10 feet from the truck, partially buried in sand. The case was intact, but the device itself looked wrong. The metal housing had warped, bent inward, as if subjected to intense pressure. The display was dark. "Is it working?" Kara had joined me. I pressed the power button. Nothing. I tried opening the case to access the memory cards. The latches were fused shut, melted somehow despite no signs of heat damage. It's dead, I said. The data's in there, but I can't access it. Vickers might be able to. If we tell Vickers, we have to tell her everything. That we came back, that we lost 8 hours, that something happened to us. Kara was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "Look at your arm." I pulled up my sleeve. On my left forearm, just below the elbow, was a mark. Not a bruise, not a cut. A perfectly circular indentation in my skin, about the size of a quarter. It wasn't red or inflamed, it just was, like it had always been there. "I have one too," Kara said, showing me her right arm. Same mark, same location. "And there's more." She pulled down her collar. At the base of her neck, 3 small marks formed a triangle. They looked like tiny burns, but perfectly symmetrical, perfectly spaced. I checked my own neck. Same marks, same pattern. "They did something to us," I said. "During those 8 hours, they did something." "We need to get back to base," Kara said. "Now." The truck started on the first try, as if nothing had ever been wrong with it. We drove back to base camp in silence, both of us hyper-aware of every sensation in our bodies, every strange feeling that might indicate something had changed. When we pulled into the camp, it was full activity. Day shift was already there. The survey crews were setting up for their work, and standing next to the security trailer was a man in a dark suit. "That's not good," Kara muttered. We parked and got out. The man in the suit walked toward us with the deliberate pace of someone who was used to being obeyed. He was maybe 50, fit, with the kind of face that gave nothing away. "Ms. Dunn, Miss Monroe." He didn't ask our names, he already knew them. "I'm Agent Frank Hollis, Department of Energy. I need you both to come with me." "On what authority?" Kara asked. "The authority of national security and several federal regulations I can cite if you'd like, but that will waste time we don't have." He gestured to a black SUV parked near the entrance. "Please, this will be easier if you cooperate." We exchanged a look. We could refuse. We could demand lawyers. But something in Hollis's eyes told me that wouldn't end well for us. "Am I under arrest?" I asked. "No, but you are persons of interest in an ongoing investigation." He opened the SUV's rear door. "Please." We got in. The vehicle had tinted windows and 2 more agents in the front seats. Neither of them spoke or acknowledged us. Hollis got in beside us, and the SUV pulled out of the camp. "Where are we going?" Kara asked. "Somewhere we can talk privately," Hollis said. "You've been exposed to a phenomenon we've been monitoring for a long time. We need to debrief you, run some tests, and determine the extent of your exposure." "Exposure to what?" Hollis didn't answer. He just stared straight ahead as the SUV drove east, away from Gerlach, away from anything resembling civilization. After 40 minutes, we turned onto a dirt road I'd never seen before. It led to a chain-link fence with serious-looking guards and gates that opened automatically. Beyond the fence was a cluster of prefabricated buildings arranged around a larger structure that was partially underground. "Welcome to Site 40, Hollis said as we parked. "Officially, this facility doesn't exist. Everything you see here, everything you hear here, is classified. By entering, you agree to those terms. Do you understand?" "Do we have a choice?" I asked. "There's always a choice. But if you choose not to cooperate, we'll have to pursue other options, and those are less pleasant for everyone involved." We were escorted into the main building and down a corridor that smelled of recycled air and industrial cleaner. They put us in separate rooms. Mine was small and windowless with a metal table, 2 chairs, and a camera mounted in the corner. I sat there for what felt like hours, but was probably only 30 minutes. Then Hollis came in with a folder and a laptop. "Let's start with what you remember," he said. I told him everything. The first sighting, the lost 23 minutes, the warning phone call to Vickers, the second encounter. When I described waking up with the marks, he made a note but didn't seem surprised. "May I see your arm?" he asked. I showed him the circular mark. He took several photographs with a specialized camera that did more than just capture visible light. "The marks will fade," he said. "Usually takes about 2 weeks. The ones on your neck will take longer, maybe a month. You've seen this before. Many times. Echo Basin has been a site of recurring anomalous activity since at least the 1950s. Probably longer, but that's when we started keeping records." "What are they?" I asked. "The lights, the things inside them." Hollis closed his laptop and looked at me directly. "Honestly, we don't know. We have theories. Non-human intelligence, that's the working assumption. Where they're from, what they want, why they focus on certain locations like Echo Basin. Those are questions we've been trying to answer for 70 years. And have you answered them? Some, not enough." He opened the folder and showed me a photograph. It was old, black and white, dated 1953. It showed a man in military uniform standing next to something that looked like the lights we'd seen. "This is Captain Richard Owens. He encountered similar phenomena near Echo Basin in July 1953. He reported lost time, unexplained marks, all the same symptoms you're exhibiting." "What happened to him?" "He lived a normal life. Finished his military service, got married, worked as an engineer, died of cancer in '98. Hollis showed me another photo. "This is Lieutenant Maria Gonzalez, 1967. Same area, same phenomena. She's still alive, retired in Arizona. We check on her annually. She's fine." "So, we're going to be fine." "Physically, yes. Psychologically, that varies. Some people process this experience well. Others struggle. We offer counseling, support, whatever you need." "In exchange for what? Our silence?" "In exchange for your cooperation. We need to understand what happened to you. The medical data, the timeline, anything you remember during those 8 hours. In return, we ensure you're healthy. We provide support, and yes, we ask that you not discuss this publicly." "What if we refuse?" Hollis stood up. "Then you'll be dealing with the aftermath alone. The nightmares, the anxiety, the questions. And if you try to go public, we'll discredit you. It's not personal. It's protocol." He left me alone again. I sat there, my mind racing. 8 hours. What happened during those 8 hours? The marks suggested physical contact. But with what? With whom? Eventually, they moved me to a medical suite. A doctor, a woman who introduced herself as Dr. Patel, ran me through a battery of tests. Blood work, scans, neurological exams. She was professional and kind, explaining each procedure. "Am I okay?" I asked when she finished. "As far as I can tell, yes. Your vitals are normal. No radiation exposure, no unusual markers in your blood work. The marks on your skin show no signs of infection or trauma beyond the surface-level indentation. But something touched me. Something made those marks. Yes, and we'll continue monitoring you for any changes, but right now, you're healthy." That should have been comforting. It wasn't. They reunited me with Kara in a room that was trying to be a lounge with uncomfortable furniture and a coffee maker. She looked as exhausted as I felt. "They told you we're fine?" she asked. "Yeah, you?" "Same. Physically fine. Psychologically, well, that's debatable." We sat in silence for a while. Then Kara said, "Hollis showed me files. Decades of encounters. We're not the first, and we won't be the last." "Did he explain what they want?" "He said they don't know, but he has a theory. He thinks they're studying us, like we're specimens. They take people, they examine them, they return them." "That's horrifying." "Yeah." Kara rubbed her face. "But it's also kind of fascinating, isn't it? We're not alone. There's something out there, something intelligent enough to travel here, to remain hidden, to interact with us on their terms." "You sound like you're okay with this." "I'm not okay with losing 8 hours of my life. I'm not okay with being marked like cattle, but I'm trying to find meaning in it, because the alternative is going crazy wondering what they did to me during that time." Dr. Vickers was brought in the next day. Hollis said they'd been in contact with her for years, that she was one of several civilian researchers they consulted with. She looked tired but intensely focused as she examined the damaged recorder. "The memory is intact," she told us. "The housing is compromised, but the solid-state storage is designed to survive extreme conditions. I can extract the data." "How long?" Hollis asked. "Give me 4 hours and access to proper equipment." They gave her what she needed. Kara and I waited, drinking bad coffee and watching the clock. Finally, Dr. Vickers emerged with a tablet. "You need to see this," she said. We gathered around the tablet. The footage was strange, colors and shapes that my eyes had trouble processing, but there was structure to it. Patterns. "This is electromagnetic spectrum recording," Dr. Vickers explained. "What you saw with your naked eye was only part of what was there. Look at this." She played a segment. The lights appeared, but on this recording they were surrounded by fields of energy, rippling and pulsing. And inside those fields, I could see shapes, geometric structures that seemed to phase in and out of reality. "They're not ships," Dr. Vickers said. "At least, not in the conventional sense. They're more like manifestations, projections from somewhere else." "Somewhere else?" I asked. "Another dimension, possibly, or another point in space-time. The energy signatures suggest localized distortions in the fabric of space. Whatever these phenomena are, they exist partially outside our normal physical laws." She advanced the footage to the moment when the lights came close to us. The timestamp showed something impossible. Time running backwards for several seconds, then forward again at variable speeds. "This is what caused your lost time," Dr. Vickers said. "The phenomenon creates a temporal distortion field. Inside that field, time doesn't flow normally. What felt like seconds to you was hours in external time." "What happened during those hours?" Kara asked. "That's the question." Dr. Vickers pulled up another segment. "The image quality degraded here, filled with static and distortion, but I could make out shapes, humanoid but wrong. And I could see ourselves, Kara and I, suspended in something that looked like light but moved like liquid." "Oh, God," I whispered. "They took you aboard," Hollis said quietly. "Or into, we're not sure of the proper terminology. For 8 hours, you were inside their phenomenon. They examined you, then they returned you. Why don't we remember?" "We think they suppress memory. Not erase it, suppress it. Some people recover fragments over time, dreams, flashes of recall. Others never remember at all." I felt sick. 8 hours of my life gone. Things done to me that I couldn't remember, by entities I couldn't understand. "There's one more thing," Dr. Vickers said. She pulled up the final segment of footage. It showed the moment we were returned to the desert. But there was something else visible in the recording, something the human eye couldn't see. A structure, underground, massive. The energy fields from the phenomenon were interacting with it, flowing into it like water into a drain. Echo Basin, Dr. Vickers said. There's something buried there, something old, and whatever these entities are, they're connected to it. What is it? I asked. We don't know. We've tried to excavate, but every attempt fails. Equipment malfunctions. People get sick. It's protected somehow. Hollis stood up. This is why we need people like you. You've been inside the phenomenon. You've been marked by it. You might have information, even if you don't consciously remember it. What are you asking? I'm asking you to work with us, to try to remember, to let us monitor you, study you. In exchange, we provide protection, support, and access to everything we know. I looked at Kara. She looked as conflicted as I felt. Can we think about it? Kara asked. Of course. Take whatever time you need. Hollis handed us each a card with a phone number. But know this. You're part of this now. Whether you work with us or not, what happened to you will be part of your life forever. We're offering a way to understand it, maybe even control it. They released us the next day with the medical monitoring devices and instructions to call if we experienced any unusual symptoms. They drove us back to Gerlach and let us go. Everything should have gone back to normal, but it didn't. I started having dreams. Not nightmares exactly. More like memories of things that never happened, or things that happened but I wasn't supposed to remember. I saw the inside of their craft, or space, or whatever it was. I saw their faces up close. I heard sounds that weren't quite language. Kara reported similar experiences. We started meeting regularly, comparing notes, trying to piece together what happened during those 8 hours. Slowly, fragments emerged. We'd been examined. That much was clear. Physical tests, neurological scans, something that felt like they were downloading our memories. But there was something else. Something neither of us could quite grasp. A message, a warning, a gift. 3 months after the incident, I woke up one morning with a complete memory. Crystal clear, like watching a high-definition video in my mind. I was floating in that space of light, and one of them was in front of me. The being, the entity, whatever it was. It wasn't touching me, but I could feel its presence in my mind, and it showed me something. Not with words or images, more like direct transmission of knowledge. The structure beneath Echo Basin. It was a beacon. Not built by them, but by something older. Something that existed before humans, before even them. It called out to the universe a signal that said, "Here is life. Here is intelligence, come and observe." They came, different species, different times. Some stayed, some left, some studied us openly. Others stayed hidden, watching, waiting to see what we would become. We weren't alone. We never had been. We were the observed, the cataloged, the studied. Earth was a laboratory, and we were the experiment. The entity wanted me to know this, wanted me to carry this knowledge. Why? I didn't fully understand. Maybe as a test, maybe as a gift, maybe just because they were curious to see what I would do with it. When I told Kara, she said she'd received something similar, a vision of the future, or a possible future, where we discovered how to access that space between dimensions, where we became travelers like them, where we found the other beacons scattered across the galaxy, each one marking a world where life had evolved, where intelligence had bloomed. It was beautiful and terrible at the same time. We called Hollis. We told him everything. He listened without interruption, taking notes. "This matches other reports," he said when we finished. "Not everyone receives this, but some do. The question is, what do we do with this knowledge? We can't tell people, I said. They'd panic, or they wouldn't believe us. Both, probably, Hollis agreed. But we can prepare. We can study. We can try to understand what role Earth plays in this larger cosmos. Are they dangerous? Kara asked. These observers? We don't think so. If they wanted to harm us, they've had thousands of years to do it. They seem content to watch. And the structure at Echo Basin? Still there, still active. We've learned to coexist with it, to work around it. Maybe one day we'll understand it fully, but that day isn't today. A year has passed since that night in the desert. Kara and I still work security, though at different sites now. We stay in touch. We compare notes on our dreams, our memories, the slow reconstruction of those 8 lost hours. The marks faded, just like Hollis said they would. But sometimes, when I look at my arm where that circle used to be, I can still feel it. An echo of contact with something beyond human understanding. I think about those lights often. I wonder if they're still there, still watching, still studying. I wonder what they learned from us, if anything. I wonder if we'll meet again. The desert keeps its secrets. But sometimes, on clear nights, I drive out to remote places and look up at the stars. And sometimes, just sometimes, I see lights that move in ways lights shouldn't move. And I remember, we are not alone. We never were. The thing about the desert is that it remembers. Scorched earth doesn't forget what touches it, what burns it, what changes it. I learned that the hard way on a Tuesday in April when everything I thought I understood about the sky stopped making sense. My name is Nina Ellis. I work for the National Transportation Safety Board, Crash Investigation Division. When planes go down, I'm one of the people who shows up to figure out why. It's not glamorous. Most of the time, it's just methodical documentation, evidence collection, and paperwork that turns tragedy into data points. Jack Sawyer was different. He wasn't a data point, he was a friend. Or, at least, as close to a friend as you can have in this line of work. We'd crossed paths on maybe a dozen investigations over the years. He was FAA, Flight Operations Inspector, the kind of guy who knew aircraft systems better than the engineers who designed them. He was also dead. Probably. His Cessna 172 had vanished somewhere over the Black Rock Desert in northwestern Nevada on April 9, 2019, and I was the one sent to find out what happened. The call came at 6:15 a.m. I was in my apartment in Reno drinking coffee and reviewing a report on a King Air turboprop that had gone down near Elko the previous month. My phone rang with the distinctive tone that meant work, emergency, drop everything. Ellis, I answered on the second ring. Nina, it's Randall. Branch Chief, my direct supervisor. His voice had that quality it got when things were bad. We have a situation. Small aircraft, single engine, failed to arrive at destination last night. Pilot was FAA, one of ours. Jack Sawyer. My coffee went cold in my hand. Jack? What was he flying? Personal aircraft, Cessna 172. Filed a flight plan from Reno to Winnemucca, routine inspection transport. He was carrying equipment, no passengers. Last radio contact was at approximately 8:47 p.m., about 40 miles north of Gerlach. What did he say? That's the thing. According to the tower recording, nothing unusual. He acknowledged his position, confirmed altitude and heading. Then the signal just stopped. No distress call, no emergency declaration. Just gone. I was already moving, setting down the coffee, grabbing my field bag. Search and rescue deployed? At first light. But Nina, there's something else. The last known position puts him over the Black Rock Desert, and there's weather coming in, high winds by afternoon. If we're going to find anything, we need to move now. I'm on my way. The drive from Reno to the Black Rock Desert takes about 2 hours under normal conditions. I made it in 90 minutes, pushing my field vehicle harder than I should have. The sun was just climbing above the eastern mountains when I reached the staging area at the edge of the playa. Search and Rescue had set up a command post near a dirt road turnoff. 3 vehicles, 2 helicopters on the ground, and about a dozen people in high-vis vests moving with the controlled urgency of professionals who knew time mattered. The incident commander was a woman named Sarah Brennan, Nevada Highway Patrol, with the weathered look of someone who'd spent years in the desert sun. She briefed me while pointing at a map spread across the hood of a Suburban. Last known radar position here, she tapped a point on the map. Flight path was northwest, straight line to Winnemucca. Weather was clear, visibility unlimited. No mechanical issues reported, no deviation from filed plan. Debris field? I asked. Nothing yet. Helicopters have been running grid patterns since dawn. So far, empty desert. What about ELT? Every aircraft has an emergency locator transmitter that activates on impact. No signal. We've been scanning on 121.5 and 406 MHz. Nothing. That was odd. Even if Jack had gone down hard, the ELT should have activated. Unless the impact was catastrophic enough to destroy it instantly, or unless something else had happened. I want to hear the tower recording, I said. Sarah pulled out a tablet and played the audio. Jack's voice came through clearly, calm and professional. Reno Center, Cessna November 72 Tango Mike, level at 7,500, 40 miles north of Gerlach, en route Winnemucca. The controller's response. Cessna 2 Tango Mike, radar contact, maintain VFR, report Winnemucca. Wilco 2 Tango Mike. Then nothing. The recording continued for another 30 seconds of empty air before the controller tried to raise Jack again. No response. The controller tried 3 more times over the next 5 minutes, then flagged the aircraft as overdue. Play it again, I said. She did. I listened carefully, filtering out the background noise, the slight crackle of radio transmission. There was something there just at the end after Jack's last transmission. A sound barely audible, not static, not interference. Something else. A tone maybe, or a hum. It lasted less than a second. You hear that? I asked. Sarah frowned. What? Background noise, right at the end. Can you isolate it? She tried, adjusting the audio settings on the tablet. The sound became slightly more distinct. It was definitely there. A low-frequency oscillation that didn't match any normal aircraft or radio noise I'd heard before. Equipment malfunction? Sarah suggested. Maybe. Or something interfering with the transmission. I made a note to have the full recording analyzed by specialists. One of the helicopter pilots approached, a young guy with the call sign Maverick stitched on his flight suit. He looked frustrated. We've covered the primary search area twice, he said. Expanding to secondary grid now, but I'm not seeing anything. No wreckage, no ground scars, nothing. What's the terrain like? I asked. Flat. Mostly playa, some alkali flats, scattered rock formations to the east. Visibility from the air is excellent. If there's a downed aircraft out there, we should see it. Unless it's buried, Sarah said. The playa's hard this time of year, Maverick replied. Dried out from winter. An impact would leave marks, scattered debris. We'd see something. I looked out at the desert stretching before us, thousands of acres of nothing. The playa surface white and cracked like broken glass under the morning sun. Somewhere out there was Jack's Cessna. It had to be. Aircraft don't just vanish. "I'm going out there," I said. Sarah gave me a look that said she'd expected this. "Take a radio and stay in contact. And Nina, be careful. There's a reason they call this the middle of nowhere." I loaded my gear into a field ATV, a beat-up Polaris that had seen better days but was reliable. GPS unit, emergency beacon, water, first aid kit, and my investigation equipment. The desert is unforgiving to people who go unprepared. The ride out to the last known position took 40 minutes across terrain that tested the ATV's suspension. The playa was indeed hard, baked to concrete consistency by months of sun. It cracked under the tires with sounds like breaking pottery. When I reached the coordinates, I stopped and got out. The silence was immediate and total. No wind, no birds, no insects, just the vast emptiness of the desert and the sky pressing down like a weight. I spent 2 hours walking a grid pattern, eyes on the ground, looking for anything unusual. Scratch marks, burn patterns, debris. The playa surface was pristine except for the natural cracking. No sign that an aircraft had ever been here. I was about to expand my search radius when I noticed something. A discoloration in the ground, maybe 50 yards to my east. It was subtle, easy to miss if you weren't looking carefully. The playa surface there was darker, almost black. I walked over. The dark area was roughly circular, about 12 feet in diameter. The surface texture was different too, more granular, less compacted. I knelt down and ran my gloved hand over it. The material crumbled at my touch. It wasn't just discolored, it was transformed. The alkali crust had been burned, fused into something that resembled volcanic glass in places. I'd seen this before, but only in areas where lightning had struck or where there'd been intense fire. I pulled out a sample kit and collected some of the material. Then I noticed something else partially buried in the black sand. A glint of metal. Using a brush, I carefully exposed it. It was a piece of aluminum, maybe 3 inches across and twisted and partially melted. The edges were smooth, rounded by extreme heat. I photographed it in place, then extracted it carefully. The metal was light, aircraft grade, but something about it was wrong. The melting pattern didn't match any crash scenario I'd seen. It looked like it had been exposed to heat from multiple directions simultaneously, which shouldn't be possible in a normal impact. I expanded my search around the dark circle. 10 feet out, I found another piece, then another. They were scattered in a pattern that didn't make sense for a crash. There was no debris field, no long scatter consistent with an aircraft breaking apart in flight or hitting the ground at speed. Instead, the pieces seemed to have fallen straight down, landing in a rough circle around the burned area. Like something had been here, hovering, and pieces had dropped from it. I radioed back to the command post. "Sarah, I've got something. About 200 yards east of primary coordinates. Burn pattern and metal fragments. Doesn't match any normal crash profile." "What does it match?" Her voice crackled through the radio. "I don't know yet. I need more time here." "Copy that. Weather's holding, but we've got high winds forecast for 1,400 hours. Don't stay too long." I spent another hour documenting the site. The burn pattern was consistent across the circle, suggesting a single heat source directly overhead. The temperature required to fuse alkali crust like this would be extreme, well over 2,000 degrees Fahrenheit. But there was no fuel residue, no chemical traces, nothing that would explain such intense heat. Aircraft fuel burns hot, but not this hot, and not in this pattern. I collected soil samples from inside and outside the burned circle, photographed everything from multiple angles, and flagged the location with survey markers. Then I noticed something that made me stop. Footprints. They were faint, partially obscured by the wind, but they were there. Human footprints, boot treads, leading away from the circle toward the north. Fresh, probably within the last 12 hours. Jack's boots. I followed them. They were evenly spaced, walking, not running. Whoever made them had been moving with purpose, not panic. They led north for about a quarter mile before they simply stopped. Not stopped at something. Just stopped. Like the person making them had ceased to exist mid-stride. The last print was complete, pressed fully into the cracked playa. Then nothing. No scuff marks, no indication of a turn or change in direction. Just the absence of any more tracks in any direction. I stood there, feeling the wrongness of it settle into my bones. People don't vanish. They can't. There has to be an explanation. I radioed Sarah again. I'm following a trail from the site, footprints leading north. They terminate about a quarter mile from the burn site with no indication of where the subject went. Say again, the prints just stop? Affirmative, no trace beyond the last print. There was a pause. Nina, I'm sending a unit out to your location. Stay where you are. Copy. While I waited, I photographed the footprints and the point where they ended. I walked, expanding circles around the last print, looking for any sign that I'd missed something. A transfer onto rock, a scuff mark, anything. Nothing. A vehicle appeared on the horizon 20 minutes later, bouncing across the playa. 2 search and rescue personnel, both with the grim expressions of people who'd seen too many bad outcomes. They examined the footprints, the burn site, the scattered metal. Neither of them offered an explanation that made sense. Could be a hoax, one of them said, but his tone suggested he didn't believe it. The metal's real, I said. Aircraft aluminum, heat damaged, and that burn pattern isn't something you can fake easily. What about the pilot? I don't know, but Jack wouldn't just walk away from a crash site, not without a reason. We expanded the search, bringing in one of the helicopters to fly low-level patterns around the area. They found nothing. No additional debris, no sign of Jack, no indication of where he might have gone. By early afternoon, the wind was picking up, blowing sand and alkali dust across the playa in stinging clouds. We had to abandon the site, return to the command post, and wait for conditions to improve. That night, back in my hotel room in Gerlach, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about those footprints, about the burned circle, about the sound at the end of Jack's radio transmission. I pulled up the audio file on my laptop and listened to it again and again, isolating that last second of sound. With proper audio software, I could enhance it slightly. It wasn't interference, it was a tone, pure and sustained. The frequency was consistent with nothing I recognized. Not engine noise, not avionics, not atmospheric interference. It was something else. Around 2 a.m., I gave up on sleep and started reviewing my photos from the site. The burn pattern, the metal fragments, the footprints. Something about the configuration nagged at me. I measured the distances in the photos, calculating the diameter of the burned circle, the placement of the metal pieces. They formed a pattern, not random, but geometric. The pieces were positioned at specific intervals, like they'd been part of something circular, something that had been hovering over that spot. Then I noticed something in one of the photos that I'd missed at the scene. In the background, barely visible against the pale playa surface, there were marks. Not footprints, too large for that. Indentations, 3 of them, arranged in a triangle around the burned circle. Landing gear marks. I zoomed in as far as the resolution allowed. Each indentation was roughly circular, about 2 feet across, pressed into the surface to a depth of maybe 3 inches. The spacing between them was perfectly even, forming an equilateral triangle with the burned circle at its center. Something had landed there. Something heavy enough to leave impressions in the hard playa surface. But it wasn't Jack's Cessna. The landing gear spacing was all wrong, and the weight distribution didn't match any aircraft I knew. I sat back, my mind racing. What lands in the middle of the desert, burns the ground beneath it, and leaves geometric patterns? The answer that kept coming back to me was one I didn't want to accept. But the evidence was there, documented, photographed. Something had been at that site, something that wasn't in any database, any flight plan, any official record. And Jack had encountered it. Dawn found me back at the site. I hadn't waited for official authorization, hadn't coordinated with search and rescue. This was beyond their scope now. Whatever had happened here, it required a different kind of investigation. The wind had died overnight, leaving the playa eerily still. My ATV tracks from yesterday were already being obscured by blown sand, but the burn site remained stark and obvious in the early light. I brought better equipment this time. Ground-penetrating radar, magnetometer, radiation detector. If something unusual had been here, I'd find traces of it. The radiation detector showed normal background levels, ruling out any nuclear source. The magnetometer, however, went crazy the moment I passed it over the burned circle. The readings spiked beyond the instrument's calibration, indicating extremely strong residual magnetic fields. That wasn't normal. Nothing about an aircraft crash creates persistent magnetic anomalies. I mapped the magnetic field carefully, noting how it intensified toward the center of the burned circle, and particularly at the 3 points where I'd identified the landing gear impressions. Whatever had been here had generated or carried intense magnetic fields. The ground-penetrating radar showed something even stranger. Below the burned surface, about 8 feet down, there was a void. Not a natural cavity. The shape was too regular. It appeared as a perfect sphere, approximately 3 feet in diameter, buried in the soil. I marked the location and started digging. The playa surface broke away easily once I got past the fused crust. Beneath it, the soil was loose, sandy, and strangely warm to the touch despite the morning chill. It took me nearly 2 hours to reach the void. When I did, I found something that shouldn't exist. It was a sphere, just as the radar had shown, but it wasn't a natural formation or buried artifact. It was metal, perfectly smooth, with a surface that seemed to shift colors in the sunlight. Not reflective exactly, but iridescent, like oil on water but more pronounced. The sphere was lightweight when I extracted it, maybe 5 pounds despite being the size of a basketball. There were no seams, no markings, no indication of how it had been manufactured or what it was for. I sat in the dirt next to the hole I'd dug, holding this impossible object, and tried to make sense of it. My training, my experience, my understanding of physics all said this couldn't be what it appeared to be. But here it was, solid and real in my hands. I was photographing it when my radio crackled. "Nina, this is Sarah. We've got a situation. You need to come back to command post immediately." Something in her voice made my pulse quicken. "What's happened?" "Can't discuss on open channel. How soon can you be here?" I looked at the sphere, at the dig site, at the equipment scattered around me. 30 minutes. Make it 20. This is important. I packed everything, including the sphere wrapped carefully in foam and secured in a hard case. The drive back was tense, my mind spinning through possibilities. What could be so urgent that Sarah couldn't discuss it over the radio? When I reached the command post, there were new vehicles. Black SUVs with government plates, men in dark suits who had federal agent written all over them. Sarah met me before I could even park. Her expression was tight, controlled. "You need to see something. Don't react. Don't argue. Just follow my lead." She led me to a trailer that had been set up as a temporary operations center. Inside were more suits, plus some people in military uniforms I didn't recognize. And on a table in the center of the room, under bright lights, was a piece of metal. Not one of the pieces I'd collected. This was larger, maybe 2 feet long, twisted and scorched, but I recognized it immediately. Part of a Cessna's wing strut, identifiable by the specific mounting brackets and reinforcement patterns. "Where did you find this?" I asked. One of the suits, a man in his 50s with steel gray hair and eyes that assessed me like I was a suspect, spoke. "Your name is Nina Ellis. You're the NTSB investigator assigned to this case." "That's right. And you are?" "Special Agent Marcus Reeves, FBI. This piece of aircraft wreckage was found approximately 15 miles from your search area, at a site we've been monitoring for other reasons." "What other reasons?" "That's classified. What's important is that this is from the missing Cessna. Serial numbers match, but the damage pattern doesn't fit any crash scenario we've seen." I looked at the metal more carefully. He was right. The twisting and scorching suggested exposure to intense directional heat, similar to what I'd found at the burn site. But there was more damage here, more structural deformation. "Where exactly was this found?" I asked. "That's classified," Reeves repeated. "What I need to know is what you found at your site. Any debris? Any evidence of what happened?" I thought about the sphere in my vehicle, wrapped and hidden in the back. Some instinct told me not to mention it. Not yet. "Burn patterns," I said. "Some small metal fragments consistent with aircraft aluminum, and footprints that lead away from the site and then terminate with no explanation." "The pilot's footprints?" "Unknown. Could be. They're the right size for an adult male. Boot treads consistent with what FAA inspectors typically wear." Reeves exchanged glances with one of the military officers. "Ms. Ellis, I'm going to need you to turn over all evidence you've collected. All photographs. All data. This investigation is now under federal jurisdiction." "On what grounds?" "National security." That phrase, the catch-all that meant stop asking questions. I'd heard it before on cases that touched military installations or classified airspace, but this felt different. The intensity of their interest, the speed of their response, suggested this was more than just a crashed plane near a restricted area. "I'll need authorization in writing," I said, "and copies of anything I turn over. Standard procedure." "There's nothing standard about this situation," Reeves said. "But fine, you'll have your paperwork. In the meantime, you're to cease any independent investigation. The site is now restricted." "What about Jack Sawyer? Are you continuing the search?" "That's also classified." I felt anger rising. He's a person, not a data point. He has family, colleagues, people who deserve answers. And they'll get them when it's appropriate. Reeves turned to one of his associates. "Escort Miss Ellis back to her vehicle. Make sure she understands the terms." I was walked out like a suspect in custody. Sarah gave me an apologetic look but said nothing. When I reached my ATV, one of the agents checked the back. I held my breath, but he didn't open the hard case containing the sphere. Just did a visual sweep and nodded. "You can go," he said. "Remember, no further investigation. We'll be in touch about evidence transfer." I drove away slowly, watching in my mirrors as the command post became a hub of activity. More vehicles arriving, people in hazmat suits being deployed, equipment being unloaded. This was bigger than a simple plane crash. Much bigger. Back in Gerlach, I went directly to my hotel room and locked the door. I pulled out the sphere and set it on the desk, staring at it under the fluorescent light. "What are you?" I thought. As if in response, the surface shimmered, the colors shifting from blue to green to something that might have been purple but wasn't quite. The change was subtle but unmistakable. I pulled out my phone to photograph it and found I had no signal. Not unusual in Gerlach, but I'd had service earlier. I tried the room's landline. Dead. Then the lights flickered. I stood up, suddenly aware of how isolated I was. The hotel was cheap, mostly empty this time of year. There were maybe 3 other cars in the parking lot. The sphere's surface was glowing now, faintly, with its own light. Not bright, but visible in the dimming room as the lights continued to flicker. I heard footsteps in the hallway outside my door. Heavy, measured multiple people. They stopped outside my room. A knock, firm and authoritative. "Ms. Ellis, this is Agent Reeves. We need to talk." I looked at the sphere, at the door, at the window that faced the parking lot 2 stories down. My investigation kit was packed. My keys were in my pocket. I had maybe seconds to decide. "Ms. Ellis, please open the door. We know you removed evidence from the site. We need you to turn it over." How did they know? I'd been careful, unless they'd been watching the site, monitoring it somehow. Or unless the sphere itself was trackable. The door handle rattled. They were preparing to force entry. I grabbed the sphere, shoved it into my backpack along with my laptop and evidence samples, and went to the window. It opened with a screech of old metal. The roof of the single-story office building was maybe 8 feet below and offset by a few feet. Not ideal, but possible. The door burst open as I climbed onto the window ledge. I didn't look back, just jumped. I hit the roof hard, rolling to absorb impact. Something in my backpack took the brunt of it. The sphere, probably, but I didn't have time to check. I scrambled to my feet and ran across the roof to the back edge, where a dumpster provided a way down to ground level. Shouts behind me, footsteps on stairs. I hit the ground running and sprinted to my field vehicle parked in the lot's back corner. The engine caught on the first try. I peeled out, heading north on the only road that offered escape. In my mirror, I saw agents emerging from the hotel, running for their SUVs. The chase was on. Gerlach sits at the edge of nowhere, connected to civilization by a single highway that stretches across empty desert for miles in each direction. I pushed the vehicle as fast as it would go, the speedometer climbing past 80 on the straight sections. The SUVs were faster. They gained steadily, their headlights growing larger in my mirror. I needed an advantage, something they couldn't match. Then I remembered the playa. I took a hard right onto a barely visible dirt track, a route I'd used earlier in the week. It led onto the playa itself, where the flat surface stretched for miles. My vehicle was designed for this terrain. The SUVs weren't. The tires bit into the cracked earth and I accelerated across the playa in a spray of alkaline dust. Behind me, the SUVs hesitated at the edge, then followed. They were immediately in trouble, their low clearances and heavy frames struggling with the uneven surface. I gained distance, putting half a mile between us, then a mile. The sun was setting, painting the playa in shades of orange and red. Shadows stretched long from every crack and rise. That's when I saw it. A light, ahead and above. Not a star, not a plane. It was moving, but not in any way that made sense. It shifted position in stuttering jumps, appearing in one place, then another without traversing the space between. I should have been terrified. Instead, I felt something else. Recognition. Whatever had taken Jack, whatever had left that burn site and those landing gear impressions, it was here, and it was watching. The light descended, coming lower, closer. It was directly in front of me now, maybe a quarter mile away and about 500 feet up. I could see it wasn't a single light, but multiple lights arranged in a formation. a geometry that my eyes struggled to interpret. I stopped the vehicle. Behind me, the SUVs had also stopped, their headlights creating a pool of illumination in the growing darkness. But they weren't moving closer. They were just watching. The sphere in my backpack began to pulse. I could feel it through the fabric, a rhythmic throb like a heartbeat. The surface was glowing brighter now, visible even through the pack's material. I got out of the vehicle. The evening air was cold, the temperature dropping rapidly as the sun disappeared. But I wasn't cold. The sphere's warmth surrounded me, a field of heat that had nothing to do with normal thermal radiation. The lights above moved again, descending further. Now I could see structure, a shape behind the lights. It was dark, blacker than the evening sky, visible only by the absence of stars where it blocked them. It was massive, easily 100 feet across, maybe more. The geometry was all wrong, angles that didn't resolve properly, surfaces that seemed to curve in ways that violated Euclidean space. And it was silent, completely silent. No engine noise, no rotor wash, nothing. It came to a stop about 50 feet above the playa, the lights arranged around its perimeter pulsing in a pattern that seemed almost communicative. The sphere in my backpack was vibrating now, humming at a frequency I could feel in my bones. I opened the pack and took out the sphere. The moment it was exposed to the air, free from any container, it lifted from my hands. Not thrown, not blown by wind. It simply rose, hovering at eye level, rotating slowly. The colors shifted across its surface in patterns that might have been language or art, or something my mind lacked the framework to understand. Then the sphere began to move toward the larger craft, ascending in a smooth arc. I watched it go, this impossible object that defied everything I knew about physics, as it approached the thing in the sky. When it reached the craft, it simply merged with it, passing through the dark surface without resistance. The lights pulsed once, bright and almost acknowledging. Then the entire craft began to rise. It accelerated smoothly, silently, climbing until it was just another point of light among the stars. Then it shifted in that stuttering way again, and was simply gone. I stood there in the darkness, feeling the desert wind pick up, and realized I'd been holding my breath. Behind me, engines started. The SUVs were leaving, retreating back toward the highway. They'd seen it too. Whatever I'd witnessed, I wasn't alone. I didn't go back to Gerlach. Instead, I drove east through the night, putting distance between myself and whatever jurisdiction Agent Reeves represented. I didn't have a plan, just an instinct that returning now would mean the end of everything. By dawn, I was in Winnemucca, a small city where I could blend in, find a cheap motel, and think. The events of the previous days ran through my mind in a loop. Jack's disappearance, the burn site, the sphere, the craft, and the SUVs that had chased me but then stopped, just stopped and watched when the craft appeared. They knew. The government, or some branch of it, knew about these things, and they'd been monitoring the site, probably had been for years. I found a diner and ordered coffee I didn't drink and breakfast I couldn't eat. The television on the wall was playing morning news. Nothing about Jack. Nothing about a downed aircraft or a missing FAA inspector. It was like it had never happened. I pulled out my laptop and connected to the diner's Wi-Fi using a VPN and a disposable email account. If they were tracking me electronically, I'd make it harder. First, I searched for Black Rock Desert anomalies. The results were a mix of UFO enthusiast sites, debunking articles, and historical references to Burning Man. Nothing official, nothing scientific. Then I tried Nevada aircraft disappearances. More results, but most were decades old. Still, there was a pattern. Small aircraft, single pilots, vanishing without trace in the northern Nevada region. The incidents were spread across years, but the location cluster was obvious once you looked for it. Black Rock Desert. Again and again. I found a report from 1987 about a private pilot who'd disappeared on a flight from Reno to Lakeview, Oregon. Last known position, 40 miles north of Gerlach. The case was never solved. Another from 1995. Different pilot, same area, same outcome. And in 2003, a military training flight. 2 F-16s on a routine exercise. One of them dropped off radar near Black Rock. The pilot ejected, was recovered, but the aircraft was never found. The official report cited equipment malfunction and difficult terrain. The pilot was transferred to a desk job shortly after and retired within a year. Something was happening in that region, something persistent and recurring, and someone was covering it up. My phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer, then decided I needed to know who was looking for me. Yes, Ms. Ellis. This is Dr. Sarah Vickers. The name meant nothing to me. Who? I'm a researcher, astrophysics, retired from UC Davis. I've been studying anomalous phenomena in the Black Rock region for 15 years. I need to talk to you about what you found. How did you get this number? That's not important. What's important is that you're in danger. The people who chased you last night, they're not FBI. They're military intelligence, a special unit that deals with the situations like this. Like what? Crashed planes? No, contact events. What you witnessed last night was a contact event. And the fact that you had physical evidence, the sphere, makes you a person of interest to them. I looked around the diner. A few early morning customers, a waitress refilling coffee, a cook visible through the kitchen window. Normal people living normal lives while I sat here discussing UFOs with a stranger on the phone. Why should I trust you? You shouldn't. But I can offer you something they can't. Answers, or at least the best answers we have. Meet me. I'm in Winnemucca right now. Been here since I heard about the incident. I have equipment in my vehicle, data from 15 years of research. I can show you what's really happening. Where? She gave me an address on the north side of town. An industrial area, mostly warehouses and storage facilities. Not public, not crowded. Perfect for a trap. I'll be there. I spent that hour preparing. I backed up all my data to cloud storage using multiple redundant services. I encrypted the files and sent the passwords to a colleague I trusted, a fellow investigator who worked aviation accidents in Alaska. The message was simple. If anything happens to me, release these. Then I drove to the address Dr. Vickers had given me. It was a storage facility, rows of identical units behind a chain-link fence. Unit 47 had its door rolled up, revealing a space packed with equipment. Radio antennas, computer servers, sensor arrays, and what looked like a mobile laboratory. A woman stood outside, maybe 60, with white hair and the kind of intense focus I associated with academics who'd dedicated their lives to a single question. She waved me over. Dr. Vickers? Call me Sarah. Come inside quickly. We don't have much time. The storage unit was climate-controlled and surprisingly organized. She led me to a bank of monitors showing graphs, maps, and data streams I didn't fully understand. What is all this? I asked. 15 years of monitoring. I've had sensors placed throughout the Black Rock region, recording electromagnetic anomalies, gravitational fluctuations, any indication of unusual activity. She pulled up a map on the main monitor. Look at this. Each red dot is a confirmed anomaly event. Pattern recognition? The dots clustered around 3 primary locations, with Black Rock Desert being the most active. The pattern was consistent across years, with increased activity in spring and fall. They come here regularly, Sarah said. Whatever they are, whoever they are, this region is significant to them. My theory is that there's something underground, something that attracts them, or maybe something they left here long ago. Like what? I don't know, but I've been using ground-penetrating radar, gravimetric sensors, everything I can deploy without attracting too much attention. There are structures down there deep underground, not natural formations, built structures. She showed me data files, 3D renderings of underground spaces mapped by her sensors. They showed chambers, tunnels, geometric patterns that extended hundreds of feet below the surface. Who built them? That's the question. They predate any known human activity in the region, and the materials based on density measurements aren't consistent with anything we can produce. I thought about the sphere, about how it had lifted from my hands and merged with that craft. I found something at the site, a sphere buried about 8 feet down. It was metallic but lightweight, with a surface that changed colors. Sarah's eyes widened. You had one? An actual artifact? Had. It returned to them last night. Just floated up and merged with the craft. Incredible. That's the first confirmed recovery and observation I've heard of. Every other artifact that's been found has been confiscated by the military before any real analysis could be done. So the military knows about this. Of course they know. They've known since at least the 1940s, probably longer. There are whole departments dedicated to managing this, studying it, and keeping it secret. She pulled up another file. Project names change. Funding sources get buried in black budgets, but the work continues. They have artifacts, they have wreckage. They probably have bodies, but none of it reaches the public. Why? Why keep it secret? Fear, control, incomprehension. Take your pick. Imagine what happens if the government admits that we're being visited by non-human intelligence, that we can't stop them, can't control them, can't even fully understand them. It would fundamentally challenge everything. Religion, science, social structures. The implications are staggering. What about Jack? Jack Sawyer, the pilot who disappeared. Is he alive? Sarah's expression softened. I don't know. Sometimes they return people. Sometimes those people remember nothing. Sometimes they remember everything and wish they didn't. And sometimes people just never come back. I have to find him. You can't. If they took him, if he's with them, there's no rescue mission that will bring him back. And if you try, you'll just disappear too. I felt helpless, frustrated. This was supposed to be my area of expertise. I investigated accidents, found answers, brought closure to families. But this was beyond anything I'd trained for. What do I do? I asked. You have 2 choices. 1, you go back, you cooperate with the military, you turn over everything you know, and you sign non-disclosure agreements that will define the rest of your life. They'll probably offer you money, maybe a job with one of their contractors. You'll spend years doing work you can never talk about, investigating things you can never mention. Some people find that meaningful. Most find it soul-crushing. And the other choice? You disappear. You take what you know, you document it, you share it carefully with people who might believe you. You become a researcher like me, operating in the margins, always looking over your shoulder. It's not a glamorous life, and most people will think you're crazy. But you'll have autonomy. You'll have truth. I thought about my career, my apartment in Reno, my friends at the NTSB, a normal life doing important work. Could I walk away from that? There's a third option, Sarah said. You could do both in a way. You go back, you cooperate, but you document everything secretly. You become an insider feeding information to researchers like me. It's dangerous. And if you're caught, the consequences are severe. But it's maybe the most useful thing you could do. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Ms. Ellis, this is Agent Reeves. We need to talk. What you witnessed is classified, but we can offer you an arrangement. Call me. I showed Sarah the text. She nodded. They're being polite now because they want your cooperation. But that won't last. You need to decide what you're going to do. I stood up and walked to the open door of the storage unit, looking out at the ordinary morning, the ordinary town. Somewhere up there, beyond the blue sky and white clouds, were things that shouldn't exist. And somewhere, maybe still alive, was Jack. I want to know what happened to him. I want to know the truth, and I think the only way I get that is by going back. Sarah gave me a sad smile. Then you'll be one of them. One of the insiders. It changes you knowing this secret. You'll look at the world differently. You'll look at the sky differently. And you'll never quite feel like you belong anywhere again. I already don't belong, I said. Not after what I've seen. She handed me a business card with just an email address. If you need to reach me, use this. Encrypted communication only. And Ms. Ellis, be careful. The people you're about to work with, they've made deals with things we don't understand. They think they're in control, but they're not. Nobody is. I took the card and left. On the drive back to Gerlach, I composed a message to Agent Reeves in my head, rehearsing what I'd say, how I'd position my cooperation. By the time I reached the town, there was a new command post set up. More vehicles, more personnel, and in the center of it all, Agent Reeves standing with a tablet and a satellite phone. He saw me approach and nodded, no surprise in his expression. He'd known I'd come back. Ms. Ellis, thank you for returning. Shall we talk? We went into a trailer that had been converted into a secure meeting room. Windows covered, signal jammers active. The kind of place where secrets were discussed. You saw something last night, Reeves said. It wasn't a question. Yes. And you understand that what you saw is classified at the highest levels of national security. I understand. Good, because I'm about to offer you something that very few people get. A chance to work with us, to be part of the team that deals with this phenomenon. We need people like you, investigators, people who can analyze evidence and draw conclusions. The work is important, well-funded, and utterly secret. And in exchange? In exchange, you sign the documents, you agree to the terms, and you never discuss any of this with anyone outside the program. Family, friends, future employers, they'll all be kept in the dark. Your life becomes compartmentalized. What about Jack Sawyer? Reeves paused. What about him? Is he alive? Did they take him? We believe so. We've had similar cases. Sometimes the subjects are returned, sometimes they're not. We're doing everything we can to understand the protocol, but their motivations remain unclear. Can we get him back? Ms. Ellis, we can barely communicate with them. Recovery operations are beyond our current capabilities. I'm sorry. I felt a weight settle on me. Jack was gone, probably forever. And I was being asked to join the organization that had let it happen, that had known this was possible and done nothing to prevent it. But refusing wouldn't bring Jack back. It would just leave me powerless. I'll do it, I said. I'll sign your documents. I'll work with you, but I want full access. I want to know everything you know about this phenomenon. That will take time. The information is compartmentalized, need-to-know basis. But yes, eventually you'll have access to most of it. He slid a stack of documents across the table. Non-disclosure agreements, security clearances, medical waivers, contracts that signed away my right to discuss any of this for the rest of my life and beyond. I read them carefully, noting the penalties for violation. They were severe: prison time, financial ruin, complete destruction of credibility and career. I signed them all. Reeves collected the documents and smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Welcome to the program, Ms. Ellis. Your life just became much more complicated." He was right. Over the following months, I was briefed on what they knew. The phenomenon had been observed for decades, possibly centuries if you believed historical accounts. There were patterns, repeated behaviors, but no clear motivation. The entities, whatever they were, seemed interested in specific locations, specific people, specific technologies. The underground structures that Sarah had detected were real. The program had attempted excavation multiple times, but every effort had failed. Equipment malfunctions, unexplained illnesses among workers, structural collapses that shouldn't have been possible. It was as if the structures were protected, defended by forces they couldn't overcome. I learned about other cases like Jack's, pilots who'd vanished, been returned, or sometimes been found dead with no clear cause. The pattern was consistent: contact, disappearance, and in some cases return with missing time and no memory of what had occurred. Some of the returned subjects had been studied extensively. They showed no physical harm, no radiation exposure, no obvious signs of what had been done to them. But psychologically, they were changed. They reported dreams of places they couldn't describe, of communications that bypassed language, of knowledge that felt implanted rather than learned. And they all reported the same thing. They'd been examined, studied, cataloged, like specimens in a laboratory. 3 months after I joined the program, Jack was found. He was walking along Highway 447, about 60 miles from where he'd disappeared. A truck driver spotted him, picked him up, and called it in. When the military arrived, Jack was disoriented but physically unharmed. They brought him to the facility where I was working. I was there when they brought him in. "Jack?" I said. He looked at me, and for a moment I saw recognition. Then it faded, replaced by confusion. "Nina, how long have I been gone?" 3 months. He shook his head. "That's impossible. It was just a few hours. I was flying, the instruments went crazy, and then there was light. And then I was on the road." They took him for medical evaluation while I waited. When they finished, Reeves gave me the summary. Perfect health, no injuries, no indication of what had happened during those 3 months. But there was something else. Jack's memories were fragmented, inconsistent. He couldn't explain where he'd been or what had happened. The gaps were too large, too convenient. I was allowed to talk to him briefly, under supervision. We sat in a sterile interview room, cameras recording everything. "Do you remember anything?" I asked. "Pieces, flashes. I was somewhere cold, metallic. There were figures, but I couldn't see them clearly. They communicated, but not with words. More like impressions. Concepts pushed directly into my mind. What did they want? To understand us, I think. To study us. They examined me, took samples, ran tests. It was clinical, methodical. They weren't cruel, just completely indifferent to my fear or discomfort. Did they say why? Why you? Why that location? No, but I got the sense that this was routine for them, that they'd done this thousands of times to thousands of people, we're not special to them, Nina. We're just interesting specimens. That conversation haunted me for weeks. The idea that we were just subjects, that our lives and fears meant nothing to these visitors, was deeply unsettling. But what disturbed me more was the program's response. They debriefed Jack, studied him, then quietly retired him with a generous pension and ironclad non-disclosure agreement. He was sent home with instructions never to discuss what had happened, never to return to Nevada, never to fly again. I saw him once more before he left. He looked older, diminished somehow, like something essential had been taken from him. "Are you okay?" I asked. "I don't know. I don't think I'll ever be okay again. But I'm alive, and that's more than a lot of people get. What will you do now?" "Try to forget. Try to live a normal life. But every time I look at the sky, I'll wonder if they're up there, watching, deciding if they want to take me again." He left that afternoon, driven away by program personnel to an undisclosed location where he'd start his new life. I stayed. I had nowhere else to go. The program had become my life, my purpose, and there were still questions that needed answers. A year later, I was investigating another case, another pilot, another disappearance near Black Rock Desert. The pattern continued, unchanging, persistent. I stood at a new burn site, similar to the one where I'd found the sphere, and documented the evidence. Landing gear impressions, scattered metal fragments, footprints that led nowhere. The desert doesn't forget. But I was beginning to understand that some memories are burdens, and some knowledge comes with a price. I looked up at the clear blue sky, knowing that behind that color, beyond that atmosphere, were things we couldn't understand. And they were watching us, always watching. The work continued. It always would. The thing about the night shift is that it changes you. Not all at once, but gradually, like water wearing down stone. You start seeing patterns in the darkness, hearing things in the silence that aren't quite there, but aren't quite not there either. By the time you realize what's happening, you're already different, already changed. My name is Owen Rudd, and I've been working the night shift at Station 19 for 3 years. It's a fuel depot and way station about 60 miles northeast of Gerlach, Nevada, right on the edge of the Black Rock Desert. There's nothing else out here. Just the station, the highway, and thousands of acres of nothing in every direction. Henry Voss works nights with me. He's been here longer, maybe 5 years, though he doesn't talk about it much. Henry doesn't talk about much of anything. We work in comfortable silence most nights. Him in the main office handling the scales and paperwork, me out in the service bay or walking the perimeter. It's simple work, boring work. The kind of job that lets your mind wander to places it probably shouldn't. The radio is our connection to the world. We keep it on Channel 19, the trucker channel, listening to the conversations that flow up and down Highway 447 all night long. Mostly, it's mundane stuff. Weather reports, traffic conditions, where to find cheap coffee or a decent meal. Sometimes you hear the lonely ones, drivers who just want someone to talk to in the dark hours. Henry and I don't usually respond. We just listen. That changed on October 17, 2019. The shift started normal. I came in at 10 p.m. relieving the day crew, a married couple who ran the station during daylight hours. Henry was already there, sitting in the office with his feet up on the desk, reading a paperback Western by the light of the desk lamp. The CB radio crackled with occasional transmissions, but the highway was quiet. Thursday night, middle of October, not much traffic. "Anything interesting?" I asked. Henry shook his head without looking up from his book. "Dead quiet. Haven't had a truck stop in 2 hours. That wasn't unusual. Sometimes we'd go whole shifts without seeing more than a handful of vehicles. The isolation was part of the job, part of why it paid better than it should for such simple work. I poured coffee from the pot that was always brewing and walked out to the bay. The night was clear and cold, temperature already dropping into the 40s. Above, the stars were so bright and numerous they looked like spilled salt on black velvet. No moon yet, just darkness and stars and the yellow pools of light from the station's security floods. I did my first perimeter check at 11 p.m., walking the fence line, checking locks, making sure nothing was out of place. It's a ritual more than a necessity. Nothing ever happens out here. Nobody comes to rob a fuel depot in the middle of nowhere. But the checklist says perimeter check every 2 hours, so I do it. That's when I first heard it. Not heard, exactly. Felt it. A pressure in the air, like the atmosphere had thickened somehow. I stopped walking and looked around. Nothing visible. Nothing moving. But the feeling persisted. A sense of being watched, of presence where there should be absence. I finished the check faster than usual and went back inside. Henry was still reading. The radio crackled with a transmission. A trucker heading south reporting clear roads and no wind. His voice sounded thin and distant, even though he was probably only 10 or 15 miles away. "You feel anything weird out there?" I asked Henry. He finally looked up. "Weird how?" "I don't know. Just weird. Like something's off." Henry considered this, then shrugged. "Desert does that sometimes. Gets in your head. You been sleeping okay?" "Yeah, I guess." "Then it's nothing, just your brain playing tricks." I wanted to believe that, but the feeling didn't go away. It stayed with me, a low-level anxiety that made me check the windows more often than necessary, made me jump slightly at sounds that shouldn't have been startling. At midnight, Henry made his rounds while I manned the office. The CB continued its irregular chatter, a driver asking about road conditions near Winnemucca, another responding with information about construction zones. Normal conversations, normal night. Then the static came. It started as a low hiss underneath the regular transmissions, barely noticeable at first. But it grew, slowly overtaking the voices until there was nothing but white noise coming from the speaker. I reached for the squelch control, thinking we'd lost the signal somehow, but before I could adjust it, the static cut out. The silence that followed was absolute. Not peaceful silence, but the wrong kind. The oppressive kind. Then a voice came through, clear as a bell, no static, no distortion. "We are here." 3 words, male voice, but flat, emotionless. Like someone reading from a script they didn't understand. I stared at the radio, waited for more. Nothing came. The static returned briefly, then cleared, and normal traffic resumed as if nothing had happened. I grabbed the microphone. "Station 19 to mobile unit, please identify who just transmitted." No response. Just the normal flow of trucker conversation. Nobody acknowledging my question. Henry came back inside, stomping dust off his boots. "Quiet out there. Haven't seen headlights in either direction for at least an hour." "Did you hear that transmission?" I asked. "Someone saying, 'We are here'?" "What? No. Radio's been normal. Why?" "I just heard it. Clear as anything. 3 words. 'We are here.'" Henry walked over to the CB and checked the channel. "We're still on 19. Could have been someone close by, maybe testing their equipment." "But you didn't hear it." "I was outside. Wind maybe covered it." He looked at me with that same concerned expression from earlier. "You sure you're feeling okay?" I wasn't sure, but I nodded anyway. The next hour passed without incident. A couple of trucks stopped for fuel, quick transactions, drivers who didn't want to talk, just wanted to get back on the road. Henry handled them while I did paperwork, trying to ignore the nagging feeling that something was wrong. At 1:30 a.m., I went out to service one of the pumps that had been running slow. The mechanism needed cleaning, a simple job that took maybe 20 minutes. I worked by flashlight, the main floods turned off to save power, just the pale beam illuminating the pump internals. That's when I heard it again. Not from the radio this time, from the truck. My truck was parked near the bay, a beat-up Ford F-150 I'd been driving for 8 years. Old, but reliable. And from its cab, from the interior, I heard that voice. "We are here." Same tone, same words, but impossibly coming from my own vehicle. I dropped the flashlight. It rolled under the pump, throwing wild shadows. I walked slowly toward the truck, my heart hammering in a way that felt both terrified and ridiculous. It's just a radio transmission, I told myself. Someone on CB, the signal bouncing in weird ways. But my truck's radio wasn't on. I never left it on. I opened the driver's door. The cab was dark, the keys in my pocket. No power to any systems. But as I stood there looking at the silent dashboard, the voice came again. Not from the radio, from the rearview mirror. I saw movement in the reflection, not behind me in the real world. In the mirror itself. Shadows moving in ways that didn't correspond to anything physical, and the voice resonating from the mirror's surface as if the glass itself was a speaker. "We are here." I slammed the door and backed away. My breath came in short gasps, fog in the cold air. This wasn't right. None of this was right. I turned to run back to the office to get Henry, to confirm I wasn't losing my mind. That's when I noticed the sky. It wasn't black. Night sky should be black, or maybe dark blue at the edges where atmosphere meets space. But this sky was gray. Not cloud gray, not fog gray. A luminescent gray, like the darkness itself was glowing with some internal light source. And it was getting brighter. I stood frozen, watching as the glow intensified. It wasn't dawn. Dawn was hours away. And this light didn't come from the horizon. It came from everywhere at once, a diffuse illumination that had no source and cast no shadows. "Henry!" I shouted. "Henry, get out here!" He appeared in the office doorway, silhouetted against the yellow light from inside. "What's wrong?" "Look at the sky." He stepped outside, looked up, and went very still. When he spoke, his voice was tight, controlled. "What the hell is that?" "I don't know." We stood together, staring upward at the impossible sky. The glow continued to intensify, bright enough now that I could see the desert around us clearly, as if it were late twilight instead of the middle of the night. "Should we go inside?" I asked. "I think we should—" The radio in the office cut him off. Both of us could hear it from where we stood, the volume somehow amplified beyond what the speaker should be capable of. And it wasn't static this time. It was a sound, a low-frequency hum that you felt in your chest more than heard with your ears. Then voices, multiple voices, overlapping, speaking in that same flat tone. "We are here, we are here, we are here," over and over, like a chant or a mantra or a warning. Henry moved first. He walked quickly to his truck, a newer Dodge Ram, and got in. I heard the engine turn over, catch, then die. He tried again. Nothing. Not even the clicking of a dead battery. Just silence. I tried my truck. Same result. The key turned, but nothing happened. No lights, no sound, no power. "Owen." Henry's voice was steady, but I could hear the fear underneath. I think we need to go inside and lock the doors. That won't help. Whatever this is, inside. Now. We went. The office felt smaller than usual, the walls closer. Henry locked the door, not that a lock would matter, but I understood the gesture. It was about control, about doing something concrete when everything else made no sense. The CB radio sat on the desk, still broadcasting those overlapping voices. Henry reached for it, hesitated, then pulled the power cord from the wall. The voices continued. The radio was off, unpowered, but the voices kept coming from the speaker. We are here. We are here. We are here. Jesus Christ, Henry whispered. What is this? I didn't have an answer. I went to the window and looked out at the desert. The gray light had stabilized, bright enough to see for hundreds of yards in every direction. And in that light, I saw movement. Not on the ground, in the air. Objects, dozens of them, maybe hundreds. They hung in the sky like dark blots against the glowing gray, geometric shapes that shifted and rotated. Some were spherical, others angular, still others seemed to change form as I watched, cycling through configurations that hurt to look at. Henry, you need to see this. He joined me at the window. I heard his sharp intake of breath. Are those? I don't know what they are. The objects were descending. Not falling, but lowering with deliberate control. The closest was maybe half a mile away and dropping steadily toward the desert floor. As it got lower, details became visible. It was roughly spherical but covered in protrusions that might have been sensors or weapons or something with no human analog. The CB radio's volume increased impossibly, the voices now loud enough to hurt. We are here! We are here! We are here! Then, as suddenly as it had started, it stopped. The voices cut off mid-word. The radio went dead, truly dead this time, just a silent box on the desk. And the sky began to darken, the gray light fading back to black. The objects were still there, still visible, but they were rising now, ascending with the same controlled precision they'd descended with. Within minutes they were high enough to blend with the stars, indistinguishable from the distant points of light. The normal night returned. Black sky, white stars, the yellow glow of the station's security lights, as if nothing had happened. Henry and I stood at the window for a long time, neither of us speaking. Finally, he walked to the CB and checked it. The power light came on when he plugged it back in. He switched it to channel 19. Normal trucker chatter filled the office, mundane conversations about routes and weather. Did we just... he started. Yeah? What do we do? I thought about it. We could call the sheriff, report what we'd seen. And then what? Be laughed at? Be investigated? Lose our jobs when the company decided we were unreliable witnesses prone to hallucinations? Nothing, I said. We do nothing. We finish the shift, we go home, and we don't talk about this. Owen, what would you tell them, Henry? That we saw UFOs, that the radio talked to us, that the sky turned gray. They'd think we were drunk or high or crazy. He knew I was right. I could see it in his expression, the resignation. So we just forget it? We try. But I knew we wouldn't. Couldn't. Some things you can't forget even when you want to. The rest of that shift was the longest 6 hours of my life. Henry and I stayed inside the office, drinking coffee we didn't need, pretending to read magazines we weren't seeing. Every sound made us tense. Every transmission on the CB made us stop and listen carefully for anything unusual. At 2:30 a.m., I went outside to check the fuel pumps. The air felt different, charged somehow, like the moment before a thunderstorm. but the sky was clear, stars visible in their usual patterns. I walked the perimeter slowly, my flashlight beam cutting through the darkness. That's when I noticed the animals, or rather the absence of them. Normally, the desert at night is alive with sound. Coyotes in the distance, the rustle of small rodents, the occasional hoot of an owl. But tonight, there was nothing. Complete silence, as if every living thing had fled the area. I stopped walking and listened. The silence was so profound I could hear my own heartbeat, the blood moving through my ears. It was wrong, deeply wrong, and every instinct I had was screaming at me to go back inside. I turned to head back to the office and saw Henry standing in the doorway, backlit by the interior lights. He was looking up at the sky, not moving, just staring. "Henry?" I called out. He didn't respond, didn't even acknowledge that he'd heard me. Just kept staring upward. I followed his gaze and saw nothing unusual, just stars, but something made me pull out my phone and open the compass app. The needle was spinning wildly, unable to find magnetic north. I turned in a slow circle, watching the needle continue its erratic dance. "Henry!" I called again, louder this time. He blinked, shook his head slightly, and looked at me. "Did you say something?" "You were staring at the sky. What were you looking at?" "Was I?" He looked confused, disoriented. "I don't remember. I came to the door to check on you, and then... I don't know. Lost a few seconds there. Lost time. Even just a few seconds." The realization made my skin crawl. We went back inside together. I showed him the compass app on my phone, still spinning uselessly. Henry pulled out his own phone and got the same result. Something is disrupting the magnetic field in this area. "We should document this," Henry said, his voice tight. "Time, conditions, everything we're noticing." I grabbed a notebook and started writing. 2:37 a.m. Magnetic anomaly. Complete absence of wildlife sounds. Witness, Henry Voss, experienced brief dissociative episode, approximately 10 to 15 seconds of missing time. No visual phenomena observed. The act of writing it down made it feel more real, more manageable somehow. If we could document it, categorize it, maybe we could understand it. At 3:15 a.m., a semi-truck pulled off the highway, heading toward our pumps. But it stopped about 50 yards away, engine idling, headlights pointing at the station. It just sat there. "That's odd," Henry said. We watched the truck for several minutes. It didn't move, didn't kill the engine. Just remained stationary, as if the driver was deciding whether to come closer. I grabbed the CB microphone. "Station 19 to eastbound semi, you need assistance." Static. Then a voice, but it sounded distant, weak. Something's not right up ahead. Can you see anything unusual?" "Negative. Station is secure. What are you seeing?" "The air, it's shimmering. Like heat waves, but it's 50 degrees out here. And my instruments are going crazy. GPS lost signal, compass is spinning. Even my phone won't work right." Henry and I exchanged glances. The driver was experiencing the same anomalies we were. "How long have you been experiencing this?" I asked. "Started about 2 miles back. Getting stronger as I get closer to you. I don't know if I should come in or turn around." I thought about telling him to turn around, to get away from here. But something stopped me. If this was happening in a radius around the station, he might already be too deep in it to safely escape. "Come on in," I said. "Fuel up and get back on the road as quick as you can." The truck hesitated, then slowly rolled forward. As it got closer, I could see the driver through the windshield. A young guy, maybe late 20s, knuckles white on the steering wheel. He pulled up to the diesel pump but didn't get out immediately. just sat in the cab, looking around nervously. Finally, he emerged, moving quickly, constantly glancing at the sky. "You feel it, right?" he said when he saw us. "That pressure, like the air's too thick." "We feel it," I confirmed. "This happen often out here?" "Sometimes." He fueled his truck in record time, hands shaking slightly as he handled the pump. When he came in to pay, he kept glancing over his shoulder at the windows. "You boys should leave," he said quietly. "I've been driving these roads for 5 years. Never felt anything like this. Something's coming." "We're here until 6, Henry said. "Then lock the doors and stay inside. Don't go out unless you absolutely have to." He paid in cash, took his receipt, and practically ran back to his truck. We watched him drive away, his taillights disappearing into the darkness faster than was probably safe. "Something's coming," Henry repeated. "You think he's right?" "I think something's already here. Has been for a while. We're just becoming more aware of it." The hours between 4 a.m. and 6 a.m. crawled by. We both felt it, that sense of anticipation, of waiting for something to happen. The EMF detector I'd brought from home showed elevated readings, fluctuating between normal and significantly above baseline. At 5:30 a.m., with dawn approaching, the radio crackled to life one more time. But it wasn't the voice we'd heard before. This was different. Music. Faint, distorted, but recognizable as music. A melody that sounded almost familiar, but not quite. Like something from a dream you can't quite remember. It played for maybe 30 seconds, then faded back to static, then silence. "What was that?" Henry whispered. "I have no idea." We never figured out what that music was or where it came from. But it stayed with me, that half-familiar melody, haunting the edges of my memory. Nothing happened. The night returned to normal. A few trucks stopped for fuel in the early morning hours. We served them mechanically, exchanging the minimum necessary words, getting them back on the road as quickly as possible. At 6 a.m., the day crew arrived. The wife, Margaret, noticed something was off immediately. "You boys look like you've seen a ghost," she said. "Quiet night," Henry replied. "Just tired." She accepted this, but I caught her exchanging a glance with her husband, David. They knew something wasn't right, but they didn't push. Henry and I left together, walking to our vehicles in the gray dawn light. Real dawn this time, natural light creeping over the eastern mountains. I'd never been so grateful to see the sun. "We should talk about this," Henry said. "Not here. Not now." "Then when?" "I don't know. I need to think." We went our separate ways. I drove home on autopilot, barely aware of the road. My apartment in Gerlach was small and dark, and I didn't bother turning on lights. Just collapsed on the bed fully clothed and stared at the ceiling. Sleep didn't come. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that gray sky, those geometric objects, felt the wrongness of it all. Eventually, I gave up trying and just lay there, watching the ceiling fan rotate slowly, its shadow tracking across the plaster. My phone rang at 2 p.m. "Henry." "You awake?" he asked. "Yeah." "We need to talk, not on the phone. Can you meet me?" "Where?" "Bruno's Diner, an hour." He hung up before I could respond. Bruno. This was the only real restaurant in Gerlach, a place that served adequate food to travelers and locals alike. I got there at 3 p.m. to find Henry already in a back booth, a cup of coffee untouched in front of him. I slid in across from him. "You look like hell." "Didn't sleep, you?" "Same." The waitress came by. I ordered coffee I didn't want just to have something to do with my hands. When she left, Henry leaned forward. "I've been doing research," he said quietly. "On my phone, nothing official, just looking for similar incidents. Owen, there are others, lots of others." "What do you mean?" "Reports of the same thing. Lights in the sky, objects, strange radio transmissions. All in this area. Black Rock Desert, this whole region of northern Nevada. It's been happening for decades." I felt something cold in my stomach. "How many reports?" "Hundreds, most of them dismissed or explained away. Weather balloons, military exercises, mass hallucinations, but the details match. Gray glowing sky, objects that don't move like aircraft, radio interference. Why haven't we heard about this? Because people don't believe it, or they're afraid to talk about it, or both." He pulled out his phone and showed me a website. "There's this researcher, a woman named Dr. Sarah Vickers. She's been documenting these events for years, has a whole database." I looked at the screen. It showed a map with dots marking incident locations. The concentration around Black Rock Desert was obvious. Dozens of dots clustered in our area. "She has a contact form," Henry continued. "I was thinking we could reach out, tell her what happened." "And then what? She publishes it online and we become the crazy UFO guys? Better than keeping it inside and going nuts wondering if it was real." He had a point. The isolation was already getting to me, the uncertainty. At least talking to someone who took this seriously might provide some context, some framework for understanding. "Okay," I said, "contact her, but anonymously. No names, no specific location details." "Agreed." Henry typed out a message while I watched. He kept it brief. 2 witnesses, objects in the sky, radio anomalies, gray luminescent atmosphere. No names, no exact location, just the general region and date. He hit send. "Now what?" I asked. "Now we wait and hope she responds." We sat in silence for a while, drinking coffee and watching the other diners. Normal people living normal lives, unaware that something impossible was happening in their backyard. "What if it happens again?" I said. "What if tonight, the same thing, we document it? Photos, video, audio recordings, we get evidence. And if the equipment doesn't work, if whatever that was interferes with electronics?" Henry didn't have an answer for that. We parted ways again, agreeing to meet before our shift. I went home and tried to rest, but sleep was still impossible. Instead, I gathered equipment, a digital camera, my phone with full battery, a handheld audio recorder I used to have for music. If something happened again, I'd be ready. The shift started at 10 p.m. Henry was already there, looking haggard but determined. He had his own equipment, a video camera, a Geiger counter for some reason, and what looked like an EMF detector. "Where'd you get all that?" I asked. "Amazon, overnight shipping." He saw my expression and shrugged. "I know it's paranoid, but if we're going to do this, let's do it right." The day crew left, Margaret giving us another concerned look. "You boys sure you're okay? David can stay if you need backup." "We're fine," I assured her. "Just a little tired." She left reluctantly. Henry and I set up our equipment, placing cameras in positions that would capture the sky and the surrounding desert. The EMF detector went on the desk, where we could monitor it continuously. Everything was recording. The first few hours were uneventful. Normal traffic on the CB, occasional trucks stopping for fuel. By midnight, I was starting to think maybe it had been a one-time event, some anomaly that wouldn't repeat. Then the pressure came back. It was like before, that feeling of thickened air, of presence. I looked at Henry. He felt it too. I could tell by his expression. "It's starting," he said. The EMF detector began to beep. Slowly at first, then faster. The needle swung wildly across the display, indicating electromagnetic fields far beyond normal levels. "Camera," I said. Henry pointed his video camera at the sky while I did the same with my phone. The stars were visible, still bright, still normal, but I could feel something changing, the atmosphere itself seeming to vibrate at a frequency just below hearing. The CB radio crackled. Both of us froze, listening. Static, heavy static that rose and fell in waves. Then, cutting through it, that voice. "We are here." This time there was more. After a pause, the voice continued. "We have been here. We will remain." Henry's hand shook as he kept the camera pointed upward. "Are you getting this?" "Yeah." The sky began to glow. The same gray luminescence as before, spreading from horizon to horizon. In that light, the desert became visible in eerie detail, every rock and bush and crack in the earth sharply defined. And the objects appeared. They came from above, descending through the glowing sky. There were fewer this time, maybe a dozen, but they were closer. Close enough to see details that made my skin crawl. They weren't machines. Or maybe they were, but not any kind I could comprehend. The surfaces shifted constantly, like oil on water, but in 3 dimensions. Patterns emerged and dissolved, geometric shapes that seemed to have more angles than should be possible in normal space. One of them came very close, maybe 200 yards from the station. It hung there, rotating slowly, and I could feel it watching us. Not seeing exactly, but perceiving in some way that went beyond vision. The radio voices multiplied, dozens of them now, overlapping, creating a chorus of flat, emotionless statements. "We are here. We observe. We record. We understand." "Henry," I whispered, "are you seeing this?" "Oh God, yes." The closest object began to emit light of its own, a beam that swept across the desert floor like a searchlight, but somehow more focused, more intentional. The beam passed over the station, and when it touched the building, I felt it. A sensation of being scanned, examined, taken apart, and catalogued at some fundamental level. Then, just as suddenly as before, it ended. The objects rose, the light faded, the voices stopped. Normal night returned, leaving us standing in the parking lot with our cameras still recording empty sky. We stood there for several minutes, neither of us speaking, before Henry lowered his camera. "Tell me you got that," he said. "I don't know. I was recording, but we went inside and checked the footage." My phone showed nothing. Just regular night sky, stars, no gray glow, no objects. Henry's video camera was the same. Hours of footage showing normal night, the anomaly completely absent from the recording. "That's impossible," Henry said. "We both saw it. It was right there." The camera saw something different. Or whatever that was doesn't register on electronics the same way it does to the human eye. The EMF detector's memory log showed the spike, at least. The readings had gone off the chart during the event, then returned to normal immediately after. And the audio recorder had captured something. Those voices. Distorted and barely audible, but there. "This is something," I said. "Not much, but something." Henry played the audio again. The voices were unmistakable, even if you couldn't make out every word. And there was something else underneath them, a frequency that seemed to pulse like a carrier wave. "We need to send this to Vickers," Henry said. "She hasn't responded to the first message. Then we try again, with evidence this time." He was right. We needed answers. Needed someone to tell us we weren't losing our minds. Henry uploaded the audio file and the EMF logs to a file-sharing service and sent the link to Dr. Vickers' contact form, along with a more detailed description of what we'd experienced. The rest of the shift was quiet. Too quiet. We kept expecting something else to happen, but normal night persisted. A few trucks stopped near dawn. We served them, maintained the facade of normalcy, counted down the minutes until 6 a.m. Margaret and David arrived on time. This time, Margaret didn't comment on how we looked. Maybe we'd gotten better at hiding it, or maybe she'd decided it wasn't her business. "See you tonight?" she asked, as we prepared to leave. "Yeah," I said. "See you tonight." In the parking lot, Henry stopped me before I could get in my truck. "Owen, I've been thinking, maybe we should report this to someone official. The FAA, the military, somebody. And tell them what? That we saw UFOs and have an audio file that could be anything? It's more than most people have, and whatever this is, it's real, it's happening. Someone should know. I'll think about it," I said, though I already knew my answer. Getting officials involved would just complicate things. We'd be investigated, debriefed, probably dismissed as unreliable witnesses. The station might even shut down, unable to keep employees who reported UFO sightings. "I'm going to do it," Henry said, "with or without you. This is too big to ignore. Henry, I know the risks, but my conscience won't let me stay silent. Whatever they are, they're coming here regularly. Someone needs to know." I couldn't argue with his logic, even if I disagreed with the decision. "Be careful, and don't mention me if you do report it." "I won't. This is on me." We separated. I drove home through the early morning light, exhausted but too wired to sleep. The audio recording played in my head on repeat. We are here. We observe. We record. We understand. What were they recording? What did they understand? And why here, in this empty stretch of Nevada desert? My phone buzzed around noon. An email from an address I didn't recognize. The subject line read, "Your report." I opened it. "Thank you for contacting me regarding your experiences in northern Nevada. I am very interested in speaking with you further about what you've witnessed. The details you provided match patterns I've been tracking for several years. Please call me at your earliest convenience. This is not a hoax, and you are not experiencing hallucinations. What's happening in your area is real and well documented. You are not alone. Dr. Sarah Vickers." A phone number followed. I stared at the message for a long time. This was the moment of decision. I could delete it, ignore it, pretend none of this was happening. Or I could make the call and step into whatever came next. My hand shook slightly as I dialed the number. She answered on the second ring. "This is Sarah Vickers." "Dr. Vickers, my name is—" Actually, I'd prefer to stay anonymous for now. "I understand. You're one of the witnesses from the Station 19 area?" The fact that she knew the general location from my vague description was both impressive and unsettling. "How did you—" "The concentration of incidents in that region makes it fairly obvious. Don't worry, I have no interest in exposing you. I'm a researcher, not a journalist. Everything you tell me stays confidential unless you explicitly authorize otherwise." "Okay. Yes, I'm one of the witnesses. There are two of us. We work night shift at a fuel station." "And you've experienced multiple events?" The initial report mentioned one, but the audio file suggests at least two. Two confirmed, both in the last few days, possibly more that we didn't notice or attributed to other causes. "Walk me through them. Every detail you remember, no matter how minor it might seem." I told her everything. The pressure in the air, the voices on the radio, the gray, glowing sky, the geometric objects. She listened without interrupting, occasionally making sounds of acknowledgement. When I finished, there was a long pause. "What you're describing matches a pattern I call a presence event," she finally said. "It's distinct from simple UFO sightings. The atmospheric changes, the electromagnetic anomalies, the direct communication attempts, these indicate a more interactive phenomenon." Interactive how? They're not just observing passively. They're making their presence known deliberately. The radio transmissions, the visual displays, even the fact that recording equipment fails to capture them properly. It's all consistent with a controlled revelation. Why would they reveal themselves to us? We're nobody. Just two guys working a night shift. Location matters more than the individuals. Your station sits on the edge of what I call a hot zone. Based on decades of data, certain geographic areas show persistent anomalous activity. The Black Rock Desert region is one of the most active in North America. What makes it special? That's what I've been trying to determine for 15 years. There are several theories. Underground geological features that generate unusual electromagnetic fields. Residual effects from decades of military testing and nuclear experiments in Nevada. Some researchers even suggest these locations might be interdimensional thin points where the barriers between spaces are more permeable. You're saying they're not aliens, not from space. I'm saying we don't know what they are. The assumption that unidentified objects must be extraterrestrial spacecraft is just that. An assumption. They could be from space. They could be from Earth, existing in dimensions we can't normally perceive. They could be something else entirely that doesn't fit into our categories. This was somehow more disturbing than the idea of aliens. At least aliens had a framework, a logic. Interdimensional beings operating outside normal physics were beyond comprehension. "The audio file you sent is valuable," Dr. Vickers continued. "The voice patterns and the carrier frequency underneath them match recordings from other incidents. I have a collection of similar transmissions going back to the 1970s. Whatever's generating these communications, it's consistent across time and location. Has anyone decoded them? Figured out what they're actually saying?" "The words are in English, which is curious in itself. But the meaning," she paused, "I think they're not messages intended for us specifically. More like declarations, statements of existence. We are here isn't a greeting or a threat, it's just a fact being stated. That's terrifying. Is it? Think about it from their perspective, if we can even call it that. What if they're not interested in us as individuals at all? What if we're just part of the environment they're studying or existing in? Like we might acknowledge the presence of bacteria without actually caring about individual microorganisms. I hadn't considered that angle. The idea that we might be essentially irrelevant to whatever was happening was both relieving and deeply unsettling. "What happens next?" I asked. "Do they escalate? Do more people see them?" Based on historical patterns, these presence events tend to cluster for a period, then decrease or stop entirely, sometimes for months, sometimes for years. Other areas become active while previously hot zones go quiet. It's cyclical. So it might just stop? Eventually. But in the meantime, if you're continuing to work at that location, you'll likely experience more events. They rarely happen just once or twice. That wasn't what I wanted to hear. What should we do? What precautions? There are no precautions. Nothing you do will prevent these events if they're going to occur. The best thing you can do is document them as thoroughly as possible. I know the electronic recording is problematic, but keep trying. Sometimes fragments come through. And keep detailed written logs. Times, conditions, exact words or sounds, how you felt physically and emotionally. All of it matters. You mentioned others have experienced this. Are they okay? Did anything happen to them long term? Another pause. Most people are fine, psychologically affected, certainly. Many report anxiety, sleep disturbances, a persistent feeling of being watched, but physically unharmed. There are a few cases of missing time, individuals who can't account for periods during these events. And very rarely, people simply disappear. Disappear? Vanish without trace during or shortly after a presence event. But these cases are extremely rare, maybe a dozen globally over several decades. The vast majority of witnesses remain safe, even if unsettled. Safe, but unsettled. That described how I felt exactly. We talked for another 20 minutes, Dr. Vickers giving me her secure email and promising to stay in touch. She asked if I'd be willing to participate in her research more formally, perhaps allowing her to install monitoring equipment at the station. I told her I'd think about it. After hanging up, I felt marginally better. At least someone believed us, someone with credentials and years of research. We weren't crazy. This was real. But that brought its own terror. If it was real, then the implications were staggering. We shared the world, the universe, with something beyond our understanding. Something that could appear and disappear at will, that could manipulate electronics and possibly perception itself. My phone buzzed. Text from Henry. Sheriff called me in for questioning. Said they had reports of suspicious lights near the station. Playing dumb, but they're taking it seriously. I texted back, "Did you tell them anything?" "No," said we saw nothing unusual. "But Owen, they have reports from other people. Drivers on 447, residents in Gerlach. We're not the only ones seeing this." That changed things. If the authorities were already involved, if other witnesses were coming forward, we were past the point where silence would protect us. I called Henry. He answered immediately. "Where are you?" I asked. "Still at the sheriff's office. They're letting me go, but advised me to report any future sightings immediately." Did they seem like they believed the reports? Hard to tell. They're treating it seriously, but that might just be procedure. I got the impression they've dealt with this before. "Meet me at Bruno's in an hour. We need to talk." The diner was nearly empty when I arrived. Just a couple of truckers nursing coffee in a corner booth. Henry showed up 10 minutes later, looking stressed but relieved to be free from official questioning. "They asked about the audio recording," he said as he sat down. "Someone leaked it, or they monitor those file-sharing sites. They wanted to know if I'd recorded it, where, when." "What did you tell them?" "Nothing. Said I didn't know what they were talking about. But Owen, they know. They're not stupid. They're probably going to put surveillance on the station. Let them. If they're watching, they'll see it too. Maybe that's what we need. Official witnesses who can't be dismissed." Henry considered this. "You talked to Vickers?" "Yeah. Long conversation. She confirmed everything we suspected. This is a known phenomenon, well documented and apparently cyclical. We're in an active period right now. How long does it last? She doesn't know. Could be weeks, could be months." "Great." Henry rubbed his face. "I don't know if I can keep working there, every night, waiting for it to happen again. It's too much. So, quit. No one would blame you. And then what? Everywhere I go, I'll know they're out there. At least at the station, I'm in a place where they appear. That's somehow better than wondering if they're everywhere and I just can't see them." I understood the logic, even if it was twisted. Sometimes facing fear directly was easier than living in uncertainty. "I'm staying," I said. "For now, anyway. I need to understand this. Need to see it through. Then I'll stay too. We're in this together." We finished our coffee and separated again. each heading home to try to rest before the next shift. But rest didn't come. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, my mind racing through everything I'd learned, everything I'd experienced. The shift started at 10 p.m. as always. Henry and I set up our equipment again, cameras and recorders positioned to capture any anomalies. The EMF detector sat on the desk, its needle steady at baseline levels. Midnight came and went. Nothing unusual, just normal night, normal traffic, the comfortable routine of the job. At 1:15 a.m., a truck pulled in. The driver was older, maybe in his 60s, with the weathered look of someone who'd been hauling freight for decades. He filled his tank and came inside to pay. "Quiet night?" he asked. "So far," I replied. He glanced at our equipment setup, the cameras and detectors. "You boys waiting for them to come back?" I froze. "Excuse me?" "The lights, the things in the sky, I saw them couple nights ago, about 10 miles south of here. Figured you guys would have seen them too, working out here every night." Henry and I exchanged looks. "What exactly did you see?" Henry asked. "Objects, floating, changing shape. Sky got all wrong, like someone turned on a light behind it." He shrugged. "Been driving these roads for 40 years. Seen things plenty of times. Usually keep quiet about it, but you boys have cameras set up, so I figure you know." "How often do you see them?" I asked. "Maybe once or twice a year, sometimes more frequent, like now. They come and go, don't bother nobody, just do their thing and leave." He paid for his fuel. "You want my advice? Don't let it get in your head. They're just part of the scenery out here, like the tumbleweeds and the jackrabbits. Weird, sure, but not harmful." He left, his truck's taillights disappearing down the dark highway. "Part of the scenery," Henry repeated. "Like it's normal. Maybe to him it is. 40 years of seeing this, you'd have to normalize it or go crazy." The rest of the shift was uneventful. No gray sky, no objects, no voices on the radio. Just normal desert night. But I couldn't shake what the trucker had said. If this had been happening for decades, if other people saw it regularly and just learned to live with it, then maybe we could too. The next week passed without further incidents. We worked our shifts, documented the nothing that happened, and slowly started to relax. Maybe the cycle was ending. Maybe we'd seen the last of it. Then, on October 29th, 12 days after the first event, it happened again. This time was different. More intense. The pressure came on faster, the EMF detector immediately spiking into the red. The sky turned gray in seconds rather than gradually, and the objects that appeared were massive, easily the size of aircraft carriers. And they were lower. Much lower. One hovered directly over the station, maybe 300 feet up. We could see details in its surface, patterns that looked almost like circuitry or writing in a language that hurt to look at. The whole structure rotated slowly, and as it did, we felt that scanning sensation again, stronger this time. The radio erupted with voices, not just the flat statements from before. These were different, varied in tone and pitch, almost conversational, but speaking in languages I didn't recognize. Some sounded vaguely like Russian or Chinese. Others were completely alien, syllables and phonemes that human mouths probably couldn't produce. Henry was recording everything, hands shaking but camera steady. I stood next to him, unable to look away from the massive object above us. Then it spoke. Not through the radio. The voice came from everywhere at once, resonating in the air itself. "We understand now." The words were in English, but they vibrated through my body, felt in bones and organs rather than just heard. It was the most terrifying and awe-inspiring moment of my life. The object began to ascend. The others followed, rising together in perfect formation. The gray light faded, normal darkness returned, and within minutes it was as if nothing had happened. Except this time the cameras had captured something. Not everything, not clear images, but fragments. Henry's video showed the gray sky, showed dark shapes against it, showed distortions in the air that corresponded to where the objects had been. "We got it," Henry breathed. "We actually got it." The footage wasn't perfect. The objects were mostly obscured by what looked like digital artifacts or lens flares, but it was evidence, undeniable proof that something had been there. "We need to send this to Vickers," I said. "And the sheriff, and maybe the FAA. Someone official needs to see this." I wanted to argue to maintain our anonymity. But Henry was right. This was too significant to keep secret. If there was any chance of understanding what was happening, official resources needed to be involved. We spent the rest of the shift backing up the footage, creating multiple copies on different devices and cloud services. When the day crew arrived, we left quickly, not trusting ourselves to maintain normal appearances. The footage went to Dr. Vickers first. She called within 2 hours. "This is extraordinary," she said, her voice tight with excitement. "The objects are visible, if barely. And that audio, the multilingual transmissions, I've never seen that before in any documented case. What does it mean? I think, and this is speculation, but I think what you witnessed was some kind of data upload or download. The scanning sensation, the varied languages, the phrase, 'we understand now.' It suggests they gathered information and processed it." "Information about what?" "Maybe about you specifically. Maybe about humanity in general. Maybe about Earth's current state. We don't know what interests them or what they're studying. Should we be worried? I don't think so. If their intentions were hostile, they've had countless opportunities to harm people. Instead, they just observe, record, and leave. Whatever they are, whatever they want, it doesn't seem to include harming us." That was reassuring, if not entirely comforting. Henry reported the incident to the sheriff's office, providing edited footage that showed the anomaly without revealing too many details about our monitoring setup. The response was measured but serious. A deputy came out to the station that evening to interview us again and check the area for evidence. They found nothing physical. No landing traces, no residue, nothing that couldn't be explained by normal activity. But they took our report seriously, filed it officially, and assured us that the incident was being forwarded to appropriate federal authorities. 3 days later, 2 men in suits showed up at the station during our shift. They identified themselves as Air Force investigators looking into reports of unusual aerial phenomena in the region. They were polite but thorough, asking detailed questions about what we'd seen, what we'd recorded, how we'd felt during the events. They examined our equipment, made notes, and took copies of our footage. "This area has a history of unusual sightings," one of them told us. "Most can be attributed to military exercises, weather phenomena, or misidentified conventional aircraft, but a small percentage remain unexplained." "Is this one of those?" Henry asked. "Officially, we classify it as unidentified pending further analysis. Unofficially." He glanced at his partner. "You're not the first people to report these specific phenomena, and you probably won't be the last. But most witnesses eventually stop seeing them. The activity moves elsewhere and life returns to normal. So we should just... What, ignore it? Continue your regular activities, report any future incidents through official channels, and try not to let it consume your thoughts. These phenomena, whatever they are, have been occurring for as long as we've been monitoring the skies. They're part of the background noise of existence, rare and strange but not necessarily dangerous. They left, taking our footage with them, and we never heard back officially. But the investigation's existence was somehow reassuring. We weren't crazy, weren't alone, and someone in authority acknowledged that something unexplained was happening. The events continued sporadically through November. Sometimes weeks would pass with nothing. Other times we'd experience minor incidents, strange lights, brief radio anomalies, that pressure in the air. None were as dramatic as the October 29th event, but each reminded us that the phenomenon was still active. Dr. Vickers stayed in contact, analyzing our reports and comparing them to patterns from other locations. She confirmed that the activity in our area was part of a larger cycle affecting multiple hot zones across the western United States. By December, the incidents decreased significantly. Weeks passed without anomalies. The EMF detector stayed at baseline. The sky remained normally black at night. We began to relax, to believe that maybe it was over. On Christmas Eve, working the night shift while the rest of the world celebrated, Henry and I sat in the office drinking coffee and listening to holiday music on the CB. The desert was quiet, peaceful even. No traffic, no wind, just stillness. The night had been slow. A few truckers had stopped earlier, most of them heading home to families, grateful to be making one last delivery before the holiday. One of them had given us a tin of homemade cookies from his wife, a kind gesture that made the isolation feel less stark. At 11:45 p.m., Henry stepped outside for his perimeter check. I watched him through the window, his flashlight beam sweeping across the parking lot. He stopped suddenly, the beam fixed on something in the distance. "Owen!" he called. "You need to see this." I went outside. The temperature had dropped significantly, my breath visible in thick clouds. Henry was pointing east toward the playa. Lights. Not bright, not the dramatic displays we'd seen before. These were subtle, barely visible, like stars that had descended to ground level. They moved slowly, drifting across the desert floor in patterns that seemed almost choreographed. "How long have they been there?" I asked. "Just appeared. Watch them." We stood together in the cold, watching the lights move. There were maybe a dozen of them, each about the size of a basketball from our perspective, which meant they were probably much larger if they were as far away as they appeared. They moved independently but in coordination, never colliding, never breaking formation. One of them detached from the group and began moving toward the station. It approached slowly, taking several minutes to cover the distance. As it got closer, I could see it wasn't a solid light, but something more complex. It pulsed, the luminescence shifting through colors that didn't quite match anything in normal experience. It stopped about 30 feet from where we stood, hovering at roughly chest height. The light it emitted was warm, not harsh like the security floods or the glowing gray sky we'd witnessed before. This felt almost gentle, curious. "Should we go inside?" Henry asked quietly. "I don't think it matters. If it wanted to harm us, it would have already." The light pulsed once, twice, then began to fade. But as it faded, I heard something. Not through my ears exactly, more like a whisper directly into my mind. A single word, or maybe just a concept that my brain translated into language. Peace. Then it was gone, rejoining the others in the distance. The entire group began to rise, ascending into the sky until they were indistinguishable from stars. At midnight exactly, the radio switched from music to that familiar static. Then the voice, singular this time, clear and unmistakable. "We depart, we return." Just those 4 words. Then silence, and the radio resumed its normal programming as if nothing had interrupted it. We looked at each other. Henry smiled slightly, an expression somewhere between relief and resignation. "Merry Christmas," he said. "Yeah, Merry Christmas." We didn't see anything else that night. No more lights, no objects, no gray sky. Just the message, a farewell and a promise, and that strange peaceful encounter with the single light. Inside, warming our hands on coffee mugs, we talked about what we'd experienced. Not just that night, but everything over the past months. The fear had faded somewhat, replaced by something else. Understanding, maybe. Or at least acceptance. "That light," Henry said. When it came close, "Did you feel anything?" "Peace, like it was telling us not to be afraid." "Yeah, same here." He stared into his coffee. "I think they know we're scared. Maybe that message, we depart, we return, it wasn't a threat. It was reassurance. Like telling a child you'll be back after you've gone to work. You think they see us as children? I think they see us as something they need to be gentle with. Something worth preserving, maybe. Why else the peaceful approach tonight?" It was a comforting thought, even if we had no way to verify it. The phenomena stopped after that. We continued monitoring, continued our shifts, but nothing unusual occurred through the rest of December. By January, we'd started to believe that maybe the cycle was truly over this time. Then, on January 14th, something different happened. It was a Tuesday night, slow traffic, temperature hovering around freezing. Henry was in the office doing inventory while I handled a fuel customer. A woman in a sedan heading north to Oregon. As she drove away, I noticed something odd about the stars. Not all of them were moving in ways stars should move. Some were shifting position, subtle enough that you'd miss it if you weren't paying attention. I went inside and got Henry. We stood in the parking lot watching the sky. The moving points of light weren't the dramatic objects we'd seen before. These were smaller, more discreet, like satellites, but moving in patterns that orbital mechanics couldn't explain. "They're still here," Henry said, "just being more subtle about it. Monitoring us, maybe, seeing how we react now that the initial contact phase is over." We watched for 20 minutes. The lights continued their slow dance across the sky, never quite doing anything dramatic enough to alarm, but unmistakably artificial in their movement. One by one, they winked out, and normal stars remained. The show was over. Back inside, Henry opened his laptop and pulled up the logs he'd been keeping. Detailed records of every anomaly we'd experienced since October. He'd been documenting times, duration, witness accounts, everything. "You know what I realized," he said. "The intervals between events. They're not random. There's a pattern. They peak around solstices and equinoxes, and they're more frequent during new moon phases. Like they're tied to celestial mechanics? Or they understand our planet's rhythms and choose optimal times for observation. Times when natural darkness is greatest, when human activity might be lower." It made sense. Whatever they were intelligent enough to plan their appearances strategically. "Are you going to publish this?" I asked. "Give it to Vickers or someone?" "I don't know. Part of me wants answers, but another part thinks maybe some mysteries should stay mysterious. Once you fully explain something, it loses its power, its meaning." I understood. There was something profound about witnessing the unexplained, about accepting that the universe contained things beyond our comprehension. Reducing it to data and analysis might preserve the facts, but lose the essence of the experience. I still work at Station 19. So does Henry. We're still on night shift, still monitoring the CB, still watching the sky. The fear has faded, replaced by a strange sort of acceptance. We know they're out there. We know they'll come back eventually, and when they do, we'll be ready to witness it again. February came with its own surprises. Small things, mostly. Electronics behaving oddly, clocks running fast or slow, lights flickering without cause, the CB picking up transmissions on frequencies it shouldn't be able to receive. Henry started documenting these micro-anomalies, building a comprehensive record of the subtle ways the phenomenon continued to manifest. One night in late February, a different kind of witness showed up. A woman in her 70s, driving a vintage Airstream trailer, pulled in around 2 a.m. She came inside to pay for propane, and I noticed she had equipment in her trailer: cameras, recording devices, monitoring stations. "You're researchers," she said. It wasn't a question. Henry and I exchanged glances. "What makes you think that?" She smiled. "Because I've been doing this for 40 years. I know the look. The camera's positioned just so. The way you keep glancing at the sky, you've seen them." "Seen what?" I asked, cautiously. "The visitors, the lights, the impossible things that official science says don't exist." She extended her hand. "Marjorie Brennan, I've been documenting phenomena across the western states since 1979. We talked for 2 hours. Marjorie had witnessed dozens of events, had photographs and recordings that made our evidence look amateur by comparison. She'd lost jobs, relationships, credibility, all in pursuit of understanding what was happening. "The mistake most people make," she told us, "is thinking this is new. It's not. Indigenous peoples have stories going back centuries about lights in the desert, beings from the sky, interactions with something beyond. We're just the latest generation to witness it." "Why don't more people know?" Henry asked. "Because we're taught not to see. Our society, our science, they have categories for what's real and what's not. When something doesn't fit those categories, we dismiss it rather than expand our understanding. But it's always been here, just at the edge of perception." She left us her contact information and copies of some of her research. Reading through it over the following weeks, I was struck by how consistent the patterns were. Different decades, different witnesses, but the same core experiences. Lights, objects, time distortions, communication attempts, and that sense of being observed by something vastly more advanced than us. March brought warmer weather and more traffic to the station. The incidents decreased further, becoming rare enough that we could almost forget about them for days at a time. Almost. On March 23rd, the spring equinox, something significant happened. Henry and I were both outside at 1 a.m. taking a break when the familiar pressure began. But this time, we didn't feel fear. We felt anticipation. The sky didn't turn gray. Instead, a single point of light appeared directly overhead, brighter than any star but not blinding. It descended slowly until it hovered at about 500 feet, perfectly still. No radio transmission this time, no voices. Just the light, watching us as we watched it. Henry raised his hand in greeting. The gesture felt absurd and profound at the same time. The light pulsed once, as if acknowledging the gesture. We stood there for 5 minutes, human and unknown, simply coexisting. Then the light began to rise, accelerating smoothly until it vanished among the stars. "That felt different," Henry said. "Yeah, less like being studied, more like checking in, making sure we're okay." "Do you think they care? About us specifically?" "I don't know, but I think they're aware of us. Not just as specimens, but as individuals, maybe even something like friends, in whatever way such different beings can be friends." It was a strange thought, but it felt true. Over the months, the nature of the encounters had changed. from alarming to curious to almost companionable, as if they, whatever they were, had learned how to approach us in ways that wouldn't cause distress. By April, we'd settled into a new normal. We worked our shifts with the knowledge that we were part of something larger, something ongoing. The station had become more than just a workplace. It was a point of contact, a place where two realities intersected. Other workers started noticing things. The day crew reported strange readings on equipment, unexplained sounds at dusk and dawn. Travelers stopping for fuel sometimes mentioned seeing unusual lights in the distance. The phenomenon wasn't limited to us anymore. Or maybe it never had been, and people were just becoming more willing to acknowledge it. Dr. Vickers published a paper in a fringe science journal, using our data along with decades of other reports. She didn't identify us specifically, but the Station 19 incidents featured prominently. The paper didn't get much attention in mainstream academic circles, but within the community of researchers and witnesses,